patterns of segregation and foster inclusive communities free from barriers that restrict access to opportunity based on protected characteristics. The township in its land use decisions does not discriminate against persons based on race, color, national origin, religion, sex, disability, or familial status, and reviews all land use applications in accordance with federal civil rights statutes. Public comments made on the basis of bias and stereotype concerning people within these protected classes will not be taken into consideration by the township in its deliberations. We are going to have a small tribute to 9/11. It was one of the most solemn days in the history of our country. And if we could have a extended moment of silence for our first responders that were lost, American citizens that were lost, and our military men and women that were lost, I would appreciate it. And if you could say a short prayer for the people of Ukraine also.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Do I have a second?
I'll second Fisher.
Please poll the board.
Commissioner Tia?
Yes.
Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Kinder?
Yes.
Commissioner Sloniker, aye. Commissioner Warren?
Aye.
And President Marks.
Yes.
Motion passes 6 ayes, 0 nays. Oh, I thought we would do this because it's not part of the meeting. Just to make mention here that Commissioner Roman is once again absent, unexcused. Thank you.
Public hearing and voting on conditional use. Index number 2022-23A, WB Homes Land Acquisitions, LP, 404 Sunnytown Pike, North Wales, PA, 19454. Location, Rural Road, Whitehall, PA, 18052. PIN number 548895351592. The subject property is located in the R3A Special Care Community Residential Zoning District. Applicant is requesting conditional use approval pursuant to Section 27-73D7 and Section 27-141 of the Whitehall Township Zoning Ordinance for a 116-unit age-restricted over 55 special care community. Are there representatives here?
Yes.
Can you please come forward and identify yourself?
Evening. Eric Schock from Fitzpatrick, Lenz and Buba. I'm an attorney representing the applicant.
Christopher Canavan, president of WB Homes and WB Homes Land Acquisition, LP. With me this evening operating the computer is Justin Strayhorn, who is our project manager for land approvals at WB Homes.
Okay, thank you. You may proceed.
Okay. Do you want to go?
If I may, Mr.
Yes.
President, I'd just like to give the room a little background on what's going to happen tonight so that hopefully we can run it in accordance with proper procedure. Good evening, everyone. I think I know most of you. I'm the Township Solicitor. This is the time for a hearing where the board is going to act as the hearing board for this conditional use application. As you can see, we have a court reporter in the room tonight. This is a hearing. Anyone who would like to speak tonight must come forward, must state their name and address, and must be sworn. So please remember that. To help the court reporter, it's also critical that only one person speak at a time. She can't record multiple people speaking at the same time. So, again, if you're here, if you come up to speak, you'll just need to be careful that you take your time, don't speak on top of each other, and make sure that, that you can be heard. In a moment, I'm going to start the hearing. After that, the applicant, through their attorney, will have a chance to present their case. When they're finished, anyone who wants will have a chance to speak. So just wanted to talk through that process and make sure everyone understands what's going to happen. At this point, I will just ask, if anyone who is present, who is an interested party in this matter, can just raise their hand. Doesn't mean you'll necessarily testify, but just so we can see how many we have. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. I see 17 hands, so we can just make a record that we have 17 interested parties. That doesn't mean you're going to testify, but we just like to have a record of how many people identified themselves as interested parties. At this time, before Mr. Schock proceeds, I saw Mr. Gittinger, if he can come forward. Mr. Schock, can you just somehow, do you want to swear everyone at once? Is that it? Okay. Anyone who might testify tonight, doesn't mean you will for sure, but anyone who might, can you please raise your right hand and allow the court reporter to swear you in?
Do you swear by Almighty God or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please answer, I do.
I do.
Mrs. Gross, are we going to accommodate the public on this microphone?
Those are logistics
Ms.
that
Bruder?
I'm not sure of.
Are we,
Should I move the?
Larissa?
Mr. Gittinger, will you please state your name and business address for the record?
Chris Gittinger, 3219 MacArthur Road, Whitehall, PA 18052.
And what is your position with Whitehall Township?
The zoning and code enforcement officer.
And in preparation for this hearing, did you ensure that the hearing was advertised and posted?
Yes,
Can you please explain what you did?
it was advertised in the Lehigh Valley Press on August the 23rd, and then again on August the 30th. The property was posted with a copy of the notice on September the 1st, 2023, and I mailed a copy of the notice to the 53 real property owners that owned property within 200 feet of the subject property, and that was mailed on August the 28th.
Thank you, Mr. Gittinger. Do you want to admit anything into evidence, or?
I don't see a need to. However, if the record is needed in the future, we'll simply supplement with these actual copies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Schock?
All set?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I will call my first witness. But quickly before I do that, I'm sure the board is very familiar with conditional use process and the fact that conditional use, the use is permitted, subject to your review. So what we'll propose to do is Mr. Canavan will go through what is a relatively, in this instance, because of this particular use, a lengthy list of all the specific requirements we need to tell you that we meet so that you can then rule, hopefully, in our favor that the use meets the conditional use criteria in your ordinance. So while I may seem to be a little bit laborious at times, it's because I want to cover everything, and this is, I think it might go up past letter R with all the requirements for this particular one. So with that, could you state your name and spell it for the record, Mr. Shurvan?
Christopher Canavan, Canavan.
And who do you work for?
I am the president of WB Homes and also the president of WB Homes Land Acquisition LP. The limited partnership has an equitable ownership in the property in question on this application.
Okay. And did the owner execute the application authorizing you to proceed with this submission?
Yes, they did.
And can you just provide us some background of yourself personally, professionally, relevant to the application, and also a little bit about the company?
Sure. WB Homes is a residential home building and land development company. We've been in business for close to 40 years now. We've developed primarily in Bucks and Montgomery County. We have several projects now in Lehigh County and in Berks County. We are the 6th largest builder by volume in the Philadelphia MSA. And we build primarily single-family detached, single-family attached product, and have built a number of 55-plus communities similar to what we are proposing this evening. I've worked for WB Homes for 20 years now, doing all of their land approval and land acquisition during that time period. Prior to that, I was a township manager, and I'm currently a township supervisor in Lower Salford Township, Montgomery County.
Okay. And up on the screen, we have what we'll refer to as Exhibit A. And then, Mr. Gross, I can just hand in a packet then of them on paper, and with them on the screen. I didn't make multiple copies. So, Chris, can you tell us and explain via that aerial, where's the property located?
So this is the property. It's approximately 27 acres on Rural Road, between Rural Road, which would be to the west on this plan, or to the left of the plan, and the Brynwood Drive development to the east or to the right of the plan. We would have Mulchunk Road to the north, and then the Fellowship Community to the south, heading down to the Mechanicsville Road intersection. The property has been owned by the Lazarus family for many, many, many years, primarily used for agricultural purposes, with one wooded area to the southeast corner of the property, which had been retained by the family for potential logging at different times throughout the history of the property.
Okay, so in connection with this project, you've submitted a conditional use application. You also submitted land development, subdivision land development plans, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Can you turn to Exhibit B then, please? Did you retain Land Corps to prepare a layout for the proposed development?
Yes, we did.
And is that shown up on the screen right now, and we'll call it Exhibit B?
Yes, and if you'd like, I'd go through. This is a 116-unit plan in accordance with the special care community requirements of the R3A zoning district. What this plan shows is 59 detached cottage-style homes and 57 attached cottage-style homes. The property has its primary entrance of Emerson Drive on Rural Road, which on this plan would be on the bottom of the plan. And then it shows 3 emergency access connections, not full access, but emergency access connections, one each to Elizabeth Court, to the Brynwood Drive extension, and then one to Rural Road, closer to the Fellowship Drive entrance to the development underneath the PP&L power lines that are in that area. This project will be served by public water and public sewer. The sewer connection will be made through an easement at the northeasterly corner of the property out to Brynwood Drive. Water connections will be from the 12-inch main that runs in Rural Road and interconnecting that with the 8-inch lines that exist on Elizabeth Court and Brynwood Drive, with a potential interconnection on Fellowship Drive, so there's a full looping of the water system for both our community and also the adjacent Brynwood Drive and Fellowship communities. Along with the single-family attached and detached cottages, there is a communal clubhouse that is shown at the end of the extension of Elizabeth Court that is generally in the middle of the property. That clubhouse will be to the benefit of all the members of the development community and will have facilities within it that will accommodate a wellness suite so they can bring off-site wellness providers in. It will provide a fitness center. It will provide facilities for communal dining for people to bring food in. There'll be a kitchen in there for them to prepare that food and be an activity center for the community. The project also is interconnected with sidewalk throughout the development and then a trail network along Rural Road that connects back into the existing drive and sidewalk interconnectivity with Elizabeth Court, Brynwood Drive, and a trail connection that we have discussed with the fellowship community so that we can interconnect our community with fellowship and vice versa, and will provide greater pedestrian activity for everybody involved in the community. The project is in single ownership. It's one tract of ground. It will retain that as a community association, with the unit owner only buying the footprint of their building. The association will be responsible for maintaining all of the open space, all of the landscaping, all of the roadways, the stormwater facilities. There are 3 basins on the project, one in the northeast corner, one that is a subsurface basin or an underground basin that is in the parking lot behind the community center, and one that would be between Elizabeth Court and Brynwood Drive in the corner of the property closest to that. So that will handle all the stormwater facilities. That has been reviewed once by the township engineer. We have had pre-application meetings with the Lehigh County Conservation District, and are working through their feedback and comments so that we can satisfy all entities with regards to stormwater on the project. But we have been through several rounds of infiltration testing, et cetera. And then there is a landscape buffer that is shown along Rural Road. There is also street trees and landscaping throughout the development in accordance with the ordinance, and we will be supplementing buffering plantings along the outer perimeter of the property based on existing vegetation versus what will stay versus what we have to supplement. We have had the opportunity to have a landscape architect from Keystone Consulting Engineers on site and walk to the perimeter, walk to the tree line at the request of the Planning Commission so that we can work through landscaping. As you know, we're running this concurrent with our subdivision land development application, so many of those items have been reviewed by the Planning Commission. We've had feedback from the Planning Commission and are in the process of responding to those comments with regards to issues related to the wooded area and some of the design issues with the stormwater management.
Okay, and it's a good segue to the next question, which is you submitted plans, you received comments from the township staff and engineer, correct?
Correct.
You've made revisions to the plans and then resubmitted those to address those comments, is that correct?
We have not resubmitted the land development plans yet. We went through the sketch plan process, and then we've been through one submission of the land development process, and are currently doing the design work to resubmit based on those comments, which we believe will satisfy the comments that have been raised. And we've had a number of staff meetings to make sure we're on the right direction.
And you also appeared before the Planning Commission to obtain a recommendation on the conditional use, is that correct?
That is correct, and they did make a recommendation to approve the conditional use.
Okay. If you were to receive conditional use approval, then the land development plans would be resubmitted and moved to that next phase, correct?
That is absolutely correct.
You have done those plans sufficient enough to know, though, that the engineering will work on this project, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Right.
So then let's talk about the specific requirements in the ordinance, and some of this you touched on, but I just want to make sure we cover each of the criterion in the ordinance.
Yep.
So this is a special care community residence, is that correct?
That is correct.
And it's permitted by conditional use in the R3A district, is that right?
That is correct.
As required, is the development proposed on a single tract of land?
Yes.
Okay, now you've mentioned all of these, but does it consist of residential uses and support and associated uses, and what are those?
Yes, we have, the residential uses are the independent living, detached, and attached dwelling units. The support uses are within the community center clubhouse, where we will have the ability for common dining and for wellness activities. And then there are associated uses such as the walking trail, the open space, the passive open space within the community.
Okay, and the ordinance requires that the community be exclusively for those qualified persons as defined in section 27-141C of the ordinance. Will you meet that requirement?
Yes, and that will be monitored and maintained via the Homeowners Association declaration, which those will be prepared and reviewed by the township solicitor prior to adoption.
Okay, and the ordinance requires, and you've stated this, it'll be managed by a single body, is that correct? will there be restrictions to ensure common development, management, et cetera? And explain how that works, because you've done these before.
Correct. This will be managed and maintained under a homeowners association regimen. The declaration will maintain all of the restrictions that are required to maintain the development in the manner in which it is proposed this evening and for the future, meaning architectural controls. There will be sufficient budgets and funds set up to maintain all of the facilities, including the community center, the landscaping, the the private roadways, and the other common facilities that are required within that. And that HOA will be managed by a board of members of those who live within the unit, and will have professional management.
Okay. And can you tell us, what are the size of the units that you'll be building?
These units generally will be approximately 1,700 square feet, with the option to go from 1,700 up to about 2,000 square feet, with some different layouts within inside. And some of the units will be slab on grade, some of the units will be basement units. The basement areas could be finished, which would increase the size of them to that 2,000 to 2,200 square feet.
Okay, and section G1 has individual minimum habitable floor areas based on the type of unit, efficiency 1, 2, 3 bedroom unit. Are you well in excess of that for
Yes, the 2 and 3 bedroom units are 700 square feet and 900 square feet per the ordinance, and will be well in excess of that.
Okay. What's the proposed building area? The coverage, is that on the plan?
Oh,
Does
yes,
it meet-
the proposed building coverage is allowed to be 45%, and our building coverage as shown on this plan is 22%.
Okay, and you have passive use, and what does that occupy, pardon me?
So you have an overall open space requirement of 25%. We have 27% open space. Of that open space, 70% or more has to be passive. The passive open space is all of the green area, the wooded area, the trail area that we have provided. Our open space, mind you, is also net of the stormwater basin areas. So the only active use we have would be the trails and then the area in the community center.
Okay, and with regard to all of the other dimensional regulations in the ordinance, things such as setbacks and the like, do you comply, i.e. you won't be asking for relief from the zoning board, to your knowledge, on this plan for those dimensional requirements?
That is correct. We meet all of the track boundary setbacks of 40 feet, the building separation requirements for the detached product of 20 feet, the building separation requirements between attached product of 50 feet, the setbacks of 25 feet from the edge of the curb line. The density for the project is allowed to be 18 dwelling units an acre for the independent living units. We're at 4.43 dwelling units to the acre on the tract of ground.
Okay, so in terms of those development features, there's nothing extraordinary about this, fairly typical and well accommodated by the size of tract, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, can you turn to the next exhibit, please, which we'll mark as C? And is there a limit of 35 feet in height or 3 stories? If so, do you comply, and can you tell us about the design of your units?
Yes, so the elevation that is shown before you is the attached cottage product. All of them would be 2-car garage units. So looking at this, the front entry for the units on either end would be on the sides of the units, and then they would have the 2 front windows and the garage doors. Then you switch to an interior unit across the board, as you can see. These are all designed to be 1.5-story units. There would be some area in the loft area, but it would only exercise no more than half of the area of the second floor in most cases, not to raise the pitch of the roof in any way at all. So these are significantly smaller than and lower than what is required in the ordinance,
Okay.
or allowed in the ordinance. Can we go to the next one just to?
Oh, sure.
So these are the detached cottages that are shown on the plan too, just to show, again, all 2-car garage units with 2-car driveways, and these are in the 1,700 to 1,800 square foot range.
Okay.
Same height.
You touched on the density, you meet
Yep.
the density regulations. Are there requirements on the building arrangement?
Yes, the buildings you cannot have the fronts of a unit facing the rears of a unit, and we do not have that in any case on the project. You always have rears to rears or fronts or fronting to a roadway and across a road to another unit.
Okay, and are there requirements for groupings of buildings and also access to natural light?
Yes,
And have you designed these to comply with those?
yes, we have.
Okay. So what you have shown on the plan prepared by Land Corp and the units here comply with the building arrangement and building design requirements, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Are stairways, stairwells, et cetera, integrated into the units?
Yes, and I think that section of the ordinance is much more part of if you were doing a mid-rise or a high-rise building. However, for the purposes of this hearing, the only flights of steps that would be here would be maybe to a loft area, and they are all interior to the units. And on the commercial building, for that matter, the stairwell and elevator that would be required to, because it'll be a 1.5-story building with a walkout, are all interior to the building. There are no exterior stairwells.
And will you comply with laws and the regulations in the ordinance with respect to antennas, satellite dishes, and the like?
Yes, I believe only one satellite dish is allowed on the site, but I do not believe there would be any.
Okay. And then, again, this probably pertains to when you've got congregate housing, but will there be 35 contiguous square feet of storage area for the units?
Yes, there are, all of them are accommodating with closets and storage areas within the units for that purpose.
Okay. Then, again, probably more when you have congregate housing, but we talk about wheelchair accessibility and life safety, fire, that type of thing.
Wheelchair accessibility, these units are designed to all be one-floor living, master downs. Generally, there's a one step up to the front door on these. There will also be the option to have that at grade. That'll be depending on the needs of the individuals buying the units, but they will be all able to be fully wheelchair accessible if needed. With regards to security, fire, and life safety systems, they are something that we offer as an option through an outside vendor for monitoring purposes, et cetera, so that they can handle life safety requirements.
Okay. With regard to parking, there are multiple different requirements. I think only 2 of those pertain to you because they're the ones that pertain to independent
Right.
dwellings. 1 space for each unit and 1 space for every 5 units to be used by visitors to those units. Can you tell us how you've arranged parking access, et cetera, and whether you believe you comply and have not received any indication from, upon township review that this is not in compliance?
That is correct. We have, as I mentioned earlier, all of the units will be 2-car garage with 2-car driveways. So we will be well in excess of the 1 parking space needed for each of the individual units. And then we have designed throughout the development overflow parking spaces that are in between the driveways of the attached units at various spots in 2s and 3s at the end of the court in the northeast corner of the plan, along the area around the clubhouse, and then because of the width of the roadway, there will be on-street parking that would also be provided. With all that being said, the required parking that we determined was 30 spaces for the clubhouse, 116 for the units, and 24 for visitor parking, for a total of 170. And our plan, with only counting 1 space per unit, not counting the extra space in the driveway or the garage spaces, would put us at 178. Obviously, we're well in excess of that if you count the other driveway spaces in the garage.
Okay. There are provisions with regard to...
Mr. Schott, can I
Go
just
ahead.
interrupt for one moment? Your witness did actually testify about a 4th exhibit that you didn't identify.
Oh, okay.
If you could maybe
Yeah.
just so the
No,
record is clear.
We'll make that
before-
D.
Yep,
Yeah,
just
Exhibit D is the,
it's the front elevation of the detached
of
units.
the detached, and so the
Just so
complement
it's
to C.
clear. Yep.
No, thanks.
I apologize. I got
No,
ahead of
it's all
myself.
good.
Yeah.
I didn't want to interrupt your flow, but I thought before we get too far away.
He was on a roll. I didn't want to stop it. Okay, so then, with regard to the streets, there's just a few requirements. Interior street design to avoid hazards, and then tell us about maintenance of the streets.
We reviewed the street design with the Planning Commission and the Township Engineer's Office to make sure that we had appropriate distribution from the access point to both ends of the development, appropriate site triangles, et cetera. They've all been designed in compliance with that, and any outstanding issues will be resolved to the satisfaction of the Township Engineer as part of the land development process. They are being built to the township standards for how you would typically build a cross-section of the roadway. However, they will be owned and maintained by the community association so that they will not become a responsibility of the township in any way.
Okay.
And just to add, from a safety standpoint, we have sidewalks on one side of the street, and we have a number of crosswalks to provide for safe crossing and safe access throughout the development based on feedback we received of the design.
Okay, there's a requirement for pedestrian walkways where normal pedestrian traffic occurs to be 4 feet wide and with all-weather surfaces. With regard to the design, will you meet the design? And then can you just walk the board through where and how you've done the pedestrian access?
So the answer is yes, we have designed it that way, and we have sidewalks shown throughout the development, particularly we've got Sutter Drive on one side, Grand Arthur Drive on the other side, with sidewalks on the single-family detached side of the roadway, along with crosswalks. We also have the all-weather pedestrian trail coming from the corners along Rural Road, and then throughout the rest of the development, we interconnect the sidewalk, so every unit has a sidewalk adjacent to it or across from it, and then we tie into the existing sidewalk stubs at Elizabeth Court and Brynwood Drive with all-weather sidewalk that is 4 feet wide.
Okay. And then the ordinance has provisions for trash receptacles in common areas, and then also asks for some information about how loading and unloading of trash, deliveries, et cetera, will occur.
Right.
Can you tell the board about that?
Trash will be managed through a single contract with a single hauler for the whole community, that we will provide individual trash cans for each of the owners. They will be required to keep those in their garage except for trash day, and then there's specific regulations for when they go out and when they come back into the community. And we'll work through that with whatever contracts the township has with haulers to try to make sure that we're not bringing extra traffic onto streets with truck traffic from trash trucks. That's a hard thing to say.
And then are you meeting lighting requirements and shielding those lights in accordance with the ordinance for the interior lighting?
Yeah.
Can you talk about then the landscaping that you mentioned in a little bit more detail?
Yes, the landscaping, we are providing landscape berm buffering along Rural Road to shield the development, basically the traveling public from the development along Rural Road. As anybody who has traveled along that knows, that's just an open farm field at this point. So keeping landscaping and buffering in that area will be appropriate for both the interior of the development and the traveling public. We will be trying to maintain as many of the trees that exist along the exterior buffer as possible, and where not, we will supplement with new landscaping. And then throughout the development, we will be planting street trees and other landscaping in accordance with the ordinance, so that we have a full distribution of shade trees and landscape buffering throughout the development.
Okay. And will all non-impervious areas be landscape seeded or something, not just raw
Yes, sir.
dirt? Okay. Now, as you mentioned, you've prepared the land development plan. So these next ones you should have a good handle on, which is just generally explain stormwater management for the project.
So, as I had mentioned, there are 3 stormwater basins that are shown on the plan. And we've tried to manage it within the existing drainage patterns from the property, so that we have stormwater basins where drainage is currently occurring. The project is planned to be built in 2 phases, with the area to the north of the center of the development being the first phase, and the area to the south towards Fellowship would be the second phase. That only means it would be built sort of one right after the other, but we would start primarily with the focus on the north side. So the basin that is in the upper corner of the plan that is shown as Exhibit B will be one of the first built, along with the underground basin that would be adjacent to the clubhouse. Those 2 should be more than sufficient to handle the stormwater runoff for all of the improvements on the project, and should probably, in my opinion, enhance the stormwater management within that area where there is a significant amount of runoff from this field as it currently exists. And this will cut it off and manage it appropriately, and then convey it into the stormwater facilities below the basin off of Brynwood Drive. The final basin for what would be phase 2 is in the corner between Elizabeth Court and Brynwood Drive, and will handle all the upper drainage, if you will, or the southern drainage of the plan. And that would be built in that second phase to handle the stormwater from that area.
Okay. Let's see.
And just to get a little more detail, we have what will be a managed release concept basin that working on with the land, with Lehigh County Conservation District. The underground basin will probably have a certain element of spray irrigation to it, and then the other basin did have infiltration, so we're working as well with some infiltration in the basin.
And you touched on this. Is it public water and public sewer?
Yes, and we have, will serve letters from both the sewer authority and the water authority for the development.
Okay.
And they have they each have received full land development plans and are the water authority has given us a review, the sewer authority is working on the review, and we're currently in the process of preparing the planning module for the sewage facilities for the project.
Okay. Will other utilities be underground?
Yes, all the utilities in the development will be underground.
Okay. And can you tell us, will there be any proposed phasing of the development?
As I mentioned, we would look at a two-phased project. If you come in at the main entrance, everything to the left on this plan, which would be to the north on the plan, would be phase one, and everything to the south would be phase two. That's really more of a municipality's planning code issue of how do you fund the improvements for it to do it in a two-phase area, not for any other purpose. We'll be buying the whole property as one parcel at the very beginning.
Okay. Regarding now the general criteria
Yep.
in the zoning ordinances, I think we've covered all the specific ones. Can you just tell us how you believe this is in accordance with the spirit and intent of the comp plan and the zoning ordinance and in the best interest of the township and suitable for this site?
Well, this R3A zoning district has allowed this type of special care community, and this is the one area in the township that it's located. It does have all of the utilities that are necessary to supply a community such as this, so I think it truly meets the intent in that regard. We have looked at the site. The site is open. It's good for development from the standpoint of grading. We can make stormwater work. As I mentioned, utilities can all flow by gravity. There was no need for any sewage pumps or anything of that nature. So I think within the long-term plans of the township, it can be developed in harmony with the overall adjacent uses. We're trying to be sensitive to the fact that I think if this was developed as a single-family detached standard development, it would have made sense to make connections to Elizabeth Court and Brynwood Drive for road connections to Rural Road. But since this is a private community, it made sense to leave those as cul-de-sac or stubbed and have just emergency accesses so we can have pedestrian interconnectivity without vehicular interconnectivity. So I think it kept a suitable buffer between those two uses, and it's a logical distribution of traffic. With regards to traffic, which is another big issue, we did, we can go to the final, or I think it's 5. This will be Exhibit
E.
Caught that before I got too far ahead of myself. We did do a trip generation comparison in conjunction with our traffic study of uses that would be allowed on this property either by right or by conditional use under your current ordinance. Single-family homes, just like Brynwood Drive, we estimate would be about 70 units on the property. Our senior singles, which is what we're calling is the 116 units, is the second line. Senior condos, which would be mid-rise units, about 405 units based on the density, and then assisted living would be about 810 beds. If you look at it from every one of the classifications, whether it's daily trips, peak hour trips, morning or afternoon or Saturday, in all categories, the proposed use we have is the least impactful for traffic in the area, and pretty significantly for many of the uses. The singles will only have a peak hour morning of combined of 43, afternoon 50. The next lowest use would be single family uses of 71 and 54. We also recognize, and the township has done a good job planning, you have your Act 209 study, the intersection of Rural and Malchunk and Mechanicsville have all been identified for different improvements. As part of this development, we will be paying a fair share obligation for that, and whether that's in cash or it's something that we can do as a project in conjunction with the township, is something that we can determine as part of the land development process. But we recognize there are some impacts that we can be a part to help solve possibly, and that would be part of our land development application.
Okay. With regard to traffic, did you actually receive one round of traffic review?
We did. The township traffic engineer has reviewed the traffic study, and we are revising it to meet those. I would call those, there's nothing of a major nature to change our traffic study from those comments. There were really tweaks and clarifications that we had to provide to the study.
But that will be done as
Yeah,
part of the land
submission.
development. Exactly. Okay, with regard to other items such as, is there any to your knowledge, fire danger or extraordinary fire danger or safety of the public, or an undue concentration of population,
No, I think-
or impairing light, et cetera?
I think and I think a couple of the benefits from this standpoint, all of the attached units will be sprinklered per building code. And then so I think that's a definite improvement for the township with that type of product. We also, I think with the interconnectivity of the water lines that we're providing, that will enhance the ability for fire flow throughout the township, particularly for the Brynwood Drive community, along with Fellowship, by interconnecting all of the mains so that there will be better fire pressure within that area. So I think it's an enhancement. And from an overcrowding standpoint, as I mentioned earlier, this had been planned for significantly greater density under the special care community if it was mid-rises or something along that line. At our 4.43 dwelling units to the acre, that is a reasonable, if not low density for this type of suburban development.
Okay. How about any undue burden on public facilities such as school, parks, water, sewer, et cetera?
This population will have no impact from a population increase to the school district. It will only have a tax benefit to the school district. The water and sewer providers have both stated that they have more than sufficient capacity to accommodate these, and this area was planned for a certain amount of growth by the sewer authority. And we are providing within the community a certain amount of recreation amenities that should prevent any type of burden to otherwise township public facilities or parks.
Okay. Encroaching on any wetlands or floodplains?
We have one small area that'll be permitted on the property with regards to wetlands, but no floodplains on the property.
Okay.
It's a vernal pool, actually, not a wetlands.
Is it consistent and in fact very near to other similar uses and thus consistent with the surrounding zoning?
Yes, the Fellowship community to the left is special care community with both cottages but also mid-rise buildings, and then you have the Horizon Village, St. Albans property, which is the mid-rise condominiums under the same type of use. So we're a much less dense use than any of those.
Okay. And then lastly, since you referenced them, I just wanted to make exhibits of the record. The will serve letter, the email from sewer that there is sewer capacity, and then that would be F, and then G, and I'll give you copies, Jack. And then H was the traffic engineer's review that you will address as part of land development.
Correct.
Apologies, Mr. Shockton, I missed E.
E was the traffic.
It was the
Oh,
traffic.
I thought you just said F was the traffic. My
No, E.
Yeah.
Got it, thank you. It's what I had it originally, and then he made me,
Did the board want to see the will serve letters? I have a copy if you did. Okay. Sure.
I think the only other comment from a neighboring community standpoint is the adjacent single-family residential community is generally a two-story community. We're building what would be 1.5-story product, so I think from a view shed density standpoint, we're not overbuilding in that area. While it will be a change for that community, it is not, the height and the design of the architecture should be generally low-rise and with the buffering blend into the community over a period of time.
Okay. That's all the questions I had for this witness. I do have the civil and the traffic engineer here, but since Mr. Canavan covered most of it, I'll call them just to substantiate them, what he said, or to answer any specific engineering questions that you had that were more in depth, but otherwise I'd open up Mr. Canavan to questions about the conditional use requirements.
Any questions from the board?
With respect to the existing residential communities, I saw several photos of single detached dwellings with mature trees in the background. On the one figure, it looks like there's sporadic trees here. Another figure looked like there was hatched out area that looked like it was wooded. How are you going to address the buffer with the existing homes and the wooded area that's going to be lost? Also, you referenced along Rural Road, there is a berm, landscape berm to provide a buffer. Does that landscape berm exist between the new development and the existing residents?
What we are doing, and thank you for the question, as you look along the property line, we have committed on the Fellowship Drive end of the development, the south side of the development, which has the most mature trees in that area. Our project is set well back from the allowed setback of 40 feet to try to preserve as much of the wood stand as we can within about 100 and 110-foot buffer area there to protect that view shed along the Fellowship Drive area. And then we have also pulled the development down along the backs of the houses on Brynwood Drive. Again, that's stand of trees in there to keep as many of the mature trees, and then we would supplement that area with additional vegetation. Some of it we can't fully identify until you take some of the trees down to see where the gaps are, but typically what we do is show landscaping in that area, have a note on the plan that this will be buffered to the satisfaction of the township engineer within that area. Along the property line, then once you get below the basin area there, along the lots that face on Elizabeth Court, that's basically just a farm hedgerow that's in that area that has grown into some mature trees. There are some of them that will be able to stay based on grading, and some of them are ash trees and some other things that are not worth keeping, and then we would supplement that with newer hardwoods that will grow into a buffer over a period of time. And then the same thing along the rear property line, that what I'd call the northern property line, coming out towards Rural Road. There's an existing tree line there that we will attempt to maintain within that 40 feet, as many of those as we can, and what we can't, we will then supplement with additional landscaping.
Okay, so your existing trees, but no landscape berm on the backside?
The berm doesn't actually work in some areas just because of the existing grading. So I think that the landscaping will serve better. I mean, the area where the basin is, that's adjacent to Brynwood Drive and Elizabeth Court, that will end up that will be a berm with the stormwater basin, and that will effectively buffer that area from that area. So we will provide berming where necessary. The problem would be to berm would then also maybe force us to remove some of the existing vegetation. Yeah.
Sidewalks, you have interior sidewalks, homes on the inside.
Right.
Residential zoning does require offset, a buffer between the curb line and, these streets are narrow, snow removal, typically the edge of the curb is where the snow lands. Is that sidewalk up against the curb line required in order to meet the distance to park a car in a driveway?
Well, we've laid it out that way, and we have done this in a large number of communities, this exact layout. And because of where it's laid out, we're able to plow and remove that, because again, it's private contractors doing it without creating a public safety hazard. And again, that's something we can address during the land development process as well with the Planning Commission and this board.
I have a couple of them.
Your question?
Excuse me, you had in front of the Planning Commission, you said you were going to get a forester in there to be marking the trees. Has that been done?
Yeah, we met with the landscape architect from Keystone Consulting Engineers, walked the whole property. He's done an evaluation of the general quality of the trees throughout the whole property in different sections, which will be submitted as part of the land development the resubmission. We then also had our own landscape architect go out, and we marked out several 100 by 100 areas to do tree counts on that. Again, that's part of what we'll be submitting as part of the land development application.
Percentage-wise, how many do you see that would be removed? Because you automatically had, if it's ash or some
Right.
other kind of bad tree, let's
Right.
call it.
I do not have a percentage for that now. I'll be happy to present that to the Planning Commission and then obviously to this board, part of the land development process.
Now, you mentioned during your testimony here that you're going to have a contracted hauler for the garbage.
Correct.
What are we doing with recyclables?
That goes, that contract is, generally the way we've handled it, is that hauler is responsible for both. We are happy to comply with any local ordinances, and they would have to comply with any local ordinances with regard to recycling. But generally, all of our homes get both a trash hopper and a recycling hopper, and they put those out separately for collection.
And have you made any deal with having Lanta have spots that they can come up with? Because I know that the streets are X number of feet. I don't know if you would have Lanta going in there, but at, the main entrance or something, because let's face it, not everybody's going to be driving.
Right.
I mean, you're sort of counting on that for some of the parking. So what,
No, I mean, we have enough parking for everybody.
well, I
Right.
understand that until till it's Christmas and everybody's there. And again, it's what happens. I mean,
Our road network, I believe, would accommodate, if need be, small bus service throughout the development.
and again, I'm not talking about small buses. I'm talking about that Atlanta would,
We
come
have
up.
not had any discussions in that
Is
regard at
it
this point.
something that you would go ahead and talk with them about? Just because it's with this many people, and we're talking 55, you're gonna have some people that maybe only have one car, and there's two people there. Somebody wants to use the bus to go to the mall or whatnot, so.
In my own ignorance, I'll admit that, is there bus service along Rural Road at this point to get to Fellowship or anywhere, or is it in that area at this time?
I have no idea.
Okay. Neither do
Okay,
I.
there isn't. But,
But-
again, you're adding this
No,
on.
I'd be happy to make that
plus-
inquiry.
Plus what
Right.
we have over at Fellowship and whatnot, I'm sure that, the more you get, the more people might use it. And
I'd be
again,
happy to make the inquiry and basically let them know of this community coming on to see if there was interest in that. Yeah. That would only serve our community well, too.
okay.
Yeah.
Are the emergency access and egress points going to be secured?
We would utilize a bollard design that would be per the specifications of the engineer's office and in coordination with your fire marshal or your fire department.
Or they just be bollards across?
So, either chains, bollards, whatever the standard is that is most acceptable, so that you can't have vehicular cars driving through there.
Commissioner Sloniker asked about the trash cans and the recycling cans. Where would you keep these in these
In the
tight of
garages.
quarters? In the garage, you're
Yeah.
supposed to keep the garbage in the garage for a week.
That is, in all of our townhome communities and all of our 55-plus communities, that is written into our homeowners association declaration. Trash cans must be maintained.
In the garage.
In the garage.
Wow.
They know it before they move in.
Traffic impact dollars. What kind of dollars have we come up with for this?
The,
Projected. I know you're not at the final traffic
we're
count
not the
yet.
final, I believe we projected somewhere in the $80,000 to $100,000 range.
How about rec fees? Recreation fees?
We would be paying the recreation fee on the per unit basis that's.
On a per unit basis in there?
Yeah.
I wasn't sure with the HOA how that was going to be proposed.
Yeah, I don't think that, we weren't looking for anything other than what the obligation is on your per unit basis.
Bear with me here a second. I have things and then I scratched them off as they got answered. Now, seems like an awful lot of housing for only one access in and out of this. Main concern being one accident and nobody's coming in and nobody's coming out.
Well, we had that.
That's an awful lot of people stuck in there, or should there be a fire and that entrance gets closed, and I know you have these accesses through Brynwood and stuff, but, we like to get fire responders in there as quick as we can, and police.
Right.
It seems like an awful lot punched into one area with only one inside and out access to Rural Road. Would you give any consideration to somehow moving that front row around and having two accesses and entrances on, boy, those words don't come out right tonight, onto, the Dutch almost came out, it was that bad. Having two entrances and exits
Well, I
on
think,
rural, one at kind of, maybe a third off of each end.
what we looked.
Just asking.
Yeah, I think we went through this in a lot of detail at the planning commission and looked at a lot of different options. And one of them was then to provide, at one point, we didn't have really an emergency access along with the main entrance on Rural Road, so we introduced that at the one end so that there was another provision, should there be an accident, it wouldn't mean everybody would route around to Brynwood Drive. I think the idea behind it is a private community, a single access controls who comes and goes through the community. We did a boulevard entrance so that it's not, there is the opportunity for one side to be blocked with the other side to be open. It's not wide, but it does work to small situations.
Because the other thing with one entrance, you have to think about if you're going to end up with Lanta giving you a bus stop in there somewhere, and not a small bus. You know, they're not gonna run a special bus just here and, you gotta land a bus in that one entrance and tried to turn left or right coming into that development to your first street. And
I
if
would-
you had cars there, waiting to make the same turn as that bus is turning head-on into, that bus would never make the turn. And everything would be choked up.
I wouldn't disagree with that comment. I think that if we were looking at Atlanta, I'd be curious if they would actually run a bus into the community or if the bus would be at the intersection of Rural Road and the driveway.
Yeah, the
They
problem-
tend to not like to go into private roads
Well,
for bus service.
well, but the problem with that, there's a lot of people here to serve, and Rural Road wouldn't be the exact best place, in my opinion, to have a bus stop.
Well,
There's a lot of
we run into
traffic
two
there,
problems in there.
and the traffic seems to move a lot, you know. Do you have a pullover there to accommodate a bus or something? Now, I know you're trying to get as many houses in here as possible, I understand all of that, you gotta make money. But in the same token, you know, planning means something here too, because you want this to succeed.
100%, just
If
like the
this is
township.
gonna happen, I'm sure everybody from the township here wants this to succeed too. With this few phone calls to the township about problems and how did this happen is possible. So now's the time,
But
now's the time.
I would agree with that.
And I would seriously suggest that we look at that,
And I'd be happy to have that discussion with.
because
planning commission
you know, there's
as
a
we
big push in
proceed.
this valley to get public transportation moving. The Lehigh Valley Planning Commission's pushing it forward, and the the Lehigh Valley Traffic, I can't think of the other name right now. You know, there's a push here to get a little better public transportation
And maybe the idea would
across
be
the valley.
to come up with an idea of, is there a way to have a pull-off or something like that? So that, because I do think that the problem with a bus service coming into a they don't typically like to go into private neighborhoods like that.
I understand that, and, you know, agreements have been made,
Right.
and can always be made. The problem is, if you're going to head in that direction, you'll never get a bus turned with another car sitting in that intersection waiting to turn out, to come out of it. It's just a jam, unless you're on the snowy road. So somehow I think that has to be given some consideration. I truly, truly do.
Mr. Ginter, can I make,
Yes, you certainly may.
on the east side of Cider Drive, it wouldn't be feasible to connect with the Fellowship Drive. There's quite a gap there.
Anything's possible.
Yeah, the only issue with a Fellowship Drive is a private road. That's the, you know, and that's, we are looking and have had successful conversations with the management there about making an interconnectivity for the pedestrian trail, just because there is a benefit to both sides from that standpoint. But it's not a public roadway to make that connection. Although I appreciate the feedback, and that's why where we brought the other emergency access out, and maybe that gets expanded to more of a real drive in that area under the power lines but that would put you also awfully close to the Fellowship Drive entrance.
Thank you, Mr. Ginter.
That's all I have for now. Thank you for answering those.
Just so everybody's aware, this was designated with how many homes that could go in there versus what you do have there.
Well, that's-
And I just want people to know, you know,
I wanted to make that, I mean, while, yes, we are appropriately trying to get a number of units on the property, we were not looking to maximize the density. There are ways that this site could have 810 beds for an assisted living facility, or 405 of the condos similar to the St. Albans, Horizon property. This, we determined, was the best transition use for what we like to build, what would work with the community of being detached and the attached with the adjacent single-family homes.
I know I heard this before, I just
Yeah, that
wanted
was-
everybody else.
I appreciate the prompt. Yes, sir.
How many houses, like as Commissioner Sloniker asked, could be put in?
That if it was just, under the ordinance, the condo building would be something that would be the density of about 405 units.
Okay, so aside from the condos,
For the
how many
size,
houses could you put in?
Assisted living, 810,
Okay.
and if it was single-family homes, just like the adjacent neighborhood, it was like 70.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any more questions from the board?
Yes, I actually have a few.
Oh, okay.
For the single-family lots, how big are the lots themselves?
There are no lots. The units are basically built, and then they have building separation to the adjacent units. So because it's one tract of ground with the units that all exist within that tract of ground.
Okay, so how big are the tracts of ground?
Well, the tract of ground is 27 acres, and then the building footprint itself is approximately a 40 by 60 footprint that the house is on. And there's a 20-foot setback to the next property on the one side.
About a quarter acre?
No, they're
No.
not. Not even. There is no. They're not buying a lot, is what it comes down to. They're buying the footprint of their building, and then the association is maintaining everything around it.
Okay, so do they own their backyards?
They do not. They have
Okay.
limited use to their backyard, to about 10 feet off their backyard for outdoor recreation.
So there's not much of a backyard?
No,
Okay,
that's all maintained in common by the association.
okay. I want to ask a little bit about the management, because I was a little confused as we were going back and forth about this. So does WB Homes retain, are they the ones maintaining the HOA over time, or are you guys building it and then it's handed off to an HOA and you never see it again?
We are building it. We set up the structure, which is the homeowners association, and then the unit owners within the community become the owners of the association. They are voting members as a unit owner, and they elect a board that oversees the management of it. We set it up with a professional management company, not our company, it's an outside professional management company that then works with the elected board to maintain the community over time.
Okay, but you're not connected to that outside
Correct.
management authority? So I mean, stuff like, garbage, a lot of things that you've said now are not necessarily things that could be maintained over time if the respective board internally chooses to change it.
The HOA declaration, and my astute attorney can tell me this, it is very hard once we set up the declaration to get the votes necessary in a 116-unit community to change those requirements. So that would be something that would also be typically our HOA declaration for the things that are then subject from a hearing such as this that we put into that declaration are not only enforceable by the members of the association, but the township has a right to enforcement to maintain those, and that the association continues to maintain them. If not, the township would have the ability to charge them to make sure they continue to maintain them.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to ask another question about the wetland and the vernal pool.
Yeah.
Is that where gonna be the retention pond is now?
No,
or what
it's up-
is?
It's right off the back corner of the power line, right in the area about unit 110.
Okay,
It's a 20 by 30 area that is a low area that drains off of Fellowship Drive.
okay. I mean, obviously, it's gonna have to be filled in, destroyed when it goes
There's an
in.
appropriate permitting process for that, and if we don't get the permitting for that, we would have to lose 1 or 2 units in that area.
With the vernal pond being there right now, in terms of stormwater going off, is unit 110 actually gonna be a unit that floods?
No,
Is that something that I should be worried
It is
about?
not, it's just a low area that, once it gets regraded, would not end up having any drainage issues at all.
Has the conservation district weighed in on any of that, or?
They've weighed in on our general design of the overall project. We've had pre-application meetings with them, with your engineer's office sitting in on them, and they generally are approving of our concept for stormwater management. We now have to prove it for the NPDS permit.
Okay. Going back a second to the design, how wide exactly are those streets?
The streets are, I think I know that right off the top of my head. "30 feet.
30 feet. So I might have to defer to an engineer here on this, but can you park a car on each side of the street and still be able to drive 2 cars?
These are designed for parking only on one side of the street. A 30-foot wide road allows for 2 travel lanes and 1 parking side. So especially when you look at the overall development, on the, I'll call it the outer loop of it where you have the attached product, there's so many curb cuts anyway, you wouldn't naturally have on-street parking because you have a curb cut for the driveway. So the only on-street parking would be opposite of that area, so that you would only ever have one side of the street where there'd be on-street parking.
Okay. Is it gonna be selected which side of the street gets?
Yeah, we would have it marked for parking and no parking.
Okay,
And that's pre-designed with this and will be signed that way.
okay. I mean, I am a little concerned about, as Commissioner Sloniker said, about, how much parking come the holidays we can fit in there, but, I mean, I have to defer to your judgment in terms of how this would work,
Right.
so.
Our feeling is between the on-street parking, the overflow parking, and the number of parking in the driveway, we have more than sufficient parking for even holiday overflow. And we've been building these for 25 years. We don't want that to become a problem either. That becomes, because we're still involved, we're building out 116 of these units. The first unit owners will be in there living through a couple seasons before we are no longer the developer and has turned over to the homeowners association. That is not an issue we want to be dealing with.
Yeah, and we're not asking for any relief. I mean, your ordinance dictates what to build, and you're building more than that.
We'll be well in excess of that.
Okay.
The numbers I cited were purely for satisfaction of zoning criteria. They were not the total number that are on the site.
I think that's all I have at this time, but thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, going last, there's, a lot of the questions were answered. But one thing I did want to ask, I know you mentioned phase one and phase two. In your experience with projects similar to this size, just timeline on, obviously there's disruption and noise to the neighborhood
Right.
around you. What's the timeline average, something like this?
Yeah, I get that asked a lot. Once we have all the permits and approvals in place, okay, we would take approximately about 6 months to build the roads, utilities, infrastructure necessary. And at that same time would hopefully be starting a model home. Then we'd start selling the units. And in a development like this, we would probably sell at a pace of about 4 units per month and build out in sequence from there. Phase one will run right into phase two. The phasing time won't extend the time period for the project. It's really just a method of how you finance the project. So when you're looking at something of that nature, you got 116 units. You're going to probably be looking at a 3 to 4 year. And really the big disruption is when we're doing the site improvements, getting the roads in, putting the basins in. Once we move to house construction, it's a little less disruptive to the overall area. You might hear some roofs going on, but you don't have the heavy equipment operating on a regular basis.
Thank you.
Any more questions from the board? Mr. Groves?
Chuck, do you have other witnesses you want to call?
I do.
Okay.
Can you state your name and spell it, please?
Alex Tweedy, Tweedie.
Okay, and who do you work for, Alex?
I'm a senior project manager with Land Corps Engineering Consultants.
And in connection with preparation of plans such as these, can you just tell us your relevant professional qualifications?
Yeah, I have a Bachelor's of Science in Civil Engineering. I am a professional engineer licensed in the state of Pennsylvania for approximately 20 years. My employment over the 20 years has been solely focused in this land development world of civil engineering, and I am also licensed in New Jersey as a professional engineer as well.
Okay. I would offer Mr. Tweedy as an expert in civil engineering. Okay, thanks. Mr. Canavan referenced it, but did you prepare the plan that's up on the screen? I think we called it Exhibit B.
Yes, I did.
Okay. And you heard Mr. Canavan go through the criteria, some of which relate to dimensional requirements, things of that sort. Was all of his testimony with regard to the engineering aspects, was that accurate?
Yes, it was all accurate.
Okay. Did you review the ordinance and lay that plan out to meet all of the layout and engineering criteria that pertain to this type of community?
Yes, we did.
Okay, so do you believe the plan complies with the ordinances and in that regard meets all of the criteria from an engineering standpoint required for this use?
Yes, other than any typical saldo waiver that we request during the typical land development process.
Okay, did you also prepare the land development plans that were submitted?
We did.
Okay, and with regard to this development on this property, from an engineering standpoint, are you aware of any adverse impact? In other words, he talked about the stormwater, there was questions about the small area of wetlands, the landscaping, the trees. Any of those create an issue for the layout that you have prepared?
No, I can't think of any impacts, and I think Mr. Canavan's testimony addressed, utility infrastructure, buffering, stormwater very well. And
Okay. And do you share his opinion that from an engineering standpoint, if you proceed, if the board grants this relief and you proceed to the land development phase, there'll be an engineering plan that can meet the requirements of the ordinance?
yes, I do.
Okay. That's all the questions I have for this witness.
Chris, any more witnesses?
I have one, oh, go ahead.
we should just confirm. Any questions from the board of this witness?
Any questions from the board?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you state your name and spell it, please?
Yes, John Wichner, Wichner.
And who do you work for?
I work with McMahon, a Bowman company located at 840 Hamilton Street, Allentown, PA, 18101.
Okay. And can you give us your relevant professional qualifications?
Yes, I have a Bachelor's of Science in Civil Engineering from the Pennsylvania State University. I also have a Master's of Science in Transportation Engineering from Villanova University. I am a licensed professional engineer in 4 states, including the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I've been practicing in the field of transportation engineering since 1999, and I've been accepted as an expert witness in over 60 municipalities in the state of Pennsylvania.
Okay, it all from Mr. Wishner as an expert in traffic engineering. Okay. You saw, I think it was Exhibit E that Mr. Canavan put
Yes,
up?
correct.
Did you prepare that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Can you just, can you give a little bit more explanation as to how this was prepared? And if you reach the same conclusion that Mr. Canavan did with respect to permitted uses on this property and traffic generation?
Yes, so there were various residential land uses that we had assessed from a trip generation perspective. As Mr. Canavan had testified to before, the first line is single-family units. These are market rate units, the typical single-family residential dwelling. The second line are the senior singles, which are attached or detached in terms of typically 55 and over communities. The third line are senior condos, kind of a multi-family, multi-building type approach for the senior living, and then assisted living, which is more in terms of beds as an independent variable. We then worked with the team to determine a density, potential density based upon this particular piece of property. As was testified to before, about 70 single-family homes could be placed on this property. The proposed development has 116 units in those senior singles category. Approximately 400 units could be in a senior condo facility, and over 800 beds could be in an assisted living facility. We then take those independent variables, either number of units or number of beds, and reference the Institute of Transportation Engineers Trip Generation Manual, the 11th edition, which is the current edition. They have done studies all across the country on very similar uses, and based upon regression equations, statistics, and average rates, we are then able to identify the number of trips on a daily basis, on a morning peak hour basis, an afternoon peak hour basis, and as well as a Saturday basis. We tend to focus on the weekday morning and weekday afternoon because it tends to be a little bit higher in many land uses. As can be seen in Exhibit E, the senior singles, which are proposed as part of this application, are the lowest of the 4 types of residential developments that can be placed on this particular site, whether via by right or through conditional use approval. And that comparison of being the lowest of all 4 uses is true during the weekday 24-hour period, the weekday morning peak hour, the weekday afternoon peak hour, as well as the Saturday midday peak hour.
Okay. And then you heard Mr. Canavan mention that there was a review letter that I submitted as Exhibit H from Benchmark. Can you characterize that and whether there's any issue contained in that letter that won't be able to be addressed during the land development process?
Yes, this is a letter issued by Benchmark Civil Engineering Services dated June 5th, 2023. In this letter, there are approximately 6 comments, one of which agrees with our trip generation calculations, one of which discusses adequate site distance of the driveways. There were 3 or 4 comments that had asked for modifications or tweaks, whether it's the text or some additional analysis that was requested during the land development phase of the project. And we are agreeable to making those tweaks and resubmitting a traffic study for benchmarks and the township's further review during land development.
Okay.
I don't see any comments in here that change the layout, the use, or really the results or conclusions of the traffic study.
You heard the one, a question from the board member regarding 2 access points. Part of that question pertained to obviously the safety question, but can you tell us from your professional background, if you believe, from a traffic generation standpoint, that one access point is sufficient to serve the traffic generation that you indicated in Exhibit E is expected from this development?
Sure. Based upon the traffic study, we do counts along Royal Road and other offsite intersections. In the morning peak hour, we are anticipating approximately 29 exiting vehicles. In the morning peak hour, 14 entering vehicles. In the afternoon peak hour, 30 entering vehicles, 20 exiting vehicles. Based upon the amount of traffic on Royal Road and the enter and exit numbers generated by this development, we then analyze that driveway. It does operate at acceptable levels of service with a single access point. I will say that in previous iterations of this plan, I've seen plans with one emergency access point. I am happy to see that the second emergency access point on the south on Royal Road on the southern property line. I think that is a good addition in lieu of 2 driveways for 24-hour access on Royal Road.
Okay, and did Benchmark review a plan that had that single access?
Yes, they did.
Did it have any comment that pertained to that single access not being sufficient to serve the number of units that are located in the development?
No, they did not.
Okay. Can you then just generally tell us about whether you think there's any adverse traffic impact or whether there'll be congestion created by this, and compare that, for example, to the other uses that might be allowed here?
Sure. From a traffic perspective, I do not see any adverse impact from that traffic perspective. And I base that answer on two items, one being the comparison of trip generation for 4 various residential land uses discussed in Exhibit E, with the proposed use at the density being the lowest trip generator of those 4 uses. And the second, which was testified to by Mr. Canavan earlier, I believe the township has done a good job in entering into the PA Act 209 Traffic Impact Fee Ordinance. It really, under the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code, it does give the township an opportunity to levy fees for the collection of monies to go toward intersections and priority intersections within the township for improvements. As was testified to earlier, the applicant understands their responsibility for the payment of those fees per the ordinance and under PA Act 209.
Okay, and the traffic impact study that you submit as part of the land development process, does that identify and require you to look at other intersections that might be impacted by the traffic?
Yes, it does.
Okay, and in this instance, did you identify any problematic impacts on other intersections, not just the intersection of the newly created entrance and Rural Road?
No, we studied 2 off-site intersections. We did not see impacts of those intersections, and basically it's due to the lower trip generation of this use as compared to other uses, other residential uses that could be on this property.
Okay, and do you know what intersections those were?
Rural Road and Mulchunk Road, as well as Rural Road in Mechanicsville.
Okay, so the next intersection in each direction?
That is correct, and that was reviewed by Benchmark as well.
Okay, and for a project of this size with that type of generation, was that normal in terms of what intersections you analyzed? In other words, how do you determine that you didn't have to study, for example, Mechanicsville Road and MacArthur Road? Can you explain that?
Sure. Typically, really industry-wide, we tend to utilize the PennDOT requirement of which intersections qualify as part of the study area. PennDOT requires, and I know Rural Road is not a state-maintained roadway, but we try to use industry standard where it's possible. PennDOT requires any off-site intersection that experiences 100 or more new morning or afternoon peak hour trips to be included in the study area. No off-site intersection experiences 100 new PM peak hour trips or AM peak hour trips. And in fact, because of the trip generation shown on Exhibit E, the driveway doesn't experience 100 new peak hour trips. But in terms of kind of the belt and suspenders, we obviously want to analyze the driveway, and it made sense to analyze one intersection north and the next major intersection south.
Okay, so in order to give your opinion that there will be no adverse traffic impact, do you believe you made all of the inquiry that you needed to make to come to that conclusion?
Yes, I have.
Okay, and is the inquiry you made similar to what you've done in many, many other projects to determine that same, an answer to that same question?
Yes, hundreds of projects.
Okay, that's all the questions I have for this witness.
Any questions for the witness?
Go ahead.
All right. You tell me, I understand if you're making a left out of the development, you get up there, you're on Mock Chunk, hey, there's a traffic light. You go to Mechanicsville. Did you ever go out that way when it's busy? I mean, really, during the times when the school buses are going or people just going to work using that, what you're saying there, I find it very hard to believe that you can use the same criteria for Mock Chunk as you could for Mechanicsville. And again, you're the expert, not me, but you're the one who has to tell me why.
Well, I'm sorry, I don't understand what you mean of use the same criteria.
Well, if you
What are
go,
you
if you
asking
go out to Mock Chunk, you have a traffic light. You go to Mechanicsville, you got a stop sign and people zipping by.
Right, but, okay.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Pardon.
Yeah.
Please hold.
Can I ask him to explain?
Sure,
Because
sure,
I think
that's what I'm
it-
asking.
Yeah, I'm trying to get your question.
Yeah.
So I guess, do you take into account the signalization or non-signalization of intersection when you do your analysis?
Absolutely. We take a look at the signalization and the unsignalized nature of an intersection. And we also take a look at the comparison of future no-build conditions versus future build conditions. You know, what is being described is is seen in some peak hours as congestion today. What we take a look at is incremental increases in the average delay. And based upon a distribution of those trips, it doesn't rise to the level of exceeding or changing the level of service of that intersection.
And I'm just asking, have you physically gone on that road and tried to get up to Mechanicsville and make a left or a right, but more so the left, because cars are coming there, there's a slight hill that you can't see over, and if they're going what the speed limit is, and we all know people don't go the speed limit, so they're going faster. I've seen many cars go up there that you're just damn lucky that they got through. And again, that's how I'm seeing this, and that's why I'm asking, did you do that? I mean, it's one thing, guys play with numbers. As soon as you tell me you're an engineer, well, you got me there as an engineer. You're playing with numbers that I won't understand.
To answer your question, I have physically driven the study area. We have submitted the information regarding analysis, trip generation, distribution of traffic, levels of service within our traffic study. That has been reviewed by Benchmark Engineering, and I think that they understand that incremental impact and the aspects of existing conditions, future no-build conditions, and then the comparison with future build conditions satisfying the ordinance criteria.
You're the guy with all of the degrees and the professional licenses. I'm just saying that when I'm as a regular guy trying to use that road, going left or right on Mechanicsville, I'm not a happy guy when I get up there, because I know that I have to do a little bit more than if I was going down to Mock Chunk. Mock Chunk, I wait for the light, I'm on my way.
So to explain, Mr. Wishner, there's an existing condition that Mr. Sloniker is describing. He said today, with nothing built, he believes you have to stop there for a certain period of time. Wait a minute, I drive it very often. I sometimes stop there for a longer time and I don't get to get my hamburger as quickly as I might want. But you then analyze, what will this additional traffic do in terms of that delay? Is that correct?
That is correct.
There are established tolerances for an increase in a delay before there needs to be mitigation or things of that sort. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. In this instance, while admittedly there will be more cars sent to that intersection, did that increase fall within the permitted tolerances under the ordinances?
Yes, it did.
Okay, so you won't dispute that there should be in your study more cars going to that intersection.
Correct.
There would be even more if you built single-family homes that are permitted on the lot, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, but there's an established tolerance for what development is permitted to cause an impact to an intersection, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, and you satisfied the criteria in this instance?
Yes, we have, in addition to the responsibility of the Act 209 fee, traffic impact fee, that is the responsibility of the applicant.
Okay, so between meeting the tolerance, but also the township having already designated this as an area where they want the money from the developer to pool and make improvements, you believe that has satisfied the ordinance?
That is correct.
Okay.
Okay, and again, that's how you feel, and that's how that's how it's written, and I know that's what you do. I went to school too.
But that's all we can do is
No,
comply with the ordinance.
and I understand, but I'm just saying, just because something is, does not mean it is correct. Yeah. I brought up about the buses before. How would that impact if there was a stop there? Because when we went through this earlier, we just said right now there isn't. But when you add up the potential, because you have St. Stephen's further down past the high school, and you have the people in Brynwood, and then you have this. So it might be something that's viable for Lanta to say, hey, yeah, let's see what we can do. How do you have that figured out, or didn't you look into that at all? I'm not sure, that's why I'm asking.
Well, I did make a note during Mr. Canavan's testimony of what I'm going to be doing tomorrow morning, and that will be reaching out to Lanta. I have worked with Lanta on various other developments. What I have tended to see from Lanta is maybe a lack of agreements to add routes or add service or add additional routes within private developments. Doesn't mean we can't ask the question, and I think it's a legitimate question to explore those conversations with Lanta, whether they provide service on Roll Road with a bus pull-off area or entering the site. I think it's a valid question, from the commissioners to make those inquiries.
You done? Just to follow on what he said about Rural Road and Mechanicsville Road. What I've heard is that you calculated peak trips in the afternoon around 80 cars, peak hour, leaving there. When I drive, a lot of people do the right, constant right turn. If you want to get to the retail district, you're not going to cross traffic, make a left, go to the light. You're going to make a right, go with the path of least resistance. You said 100 peak cars per hour was the trigger to do something else or look at the intersections in more detail, if I heard you correctly. You're saying maybe peak hours is 80.
Yeah, it's 100 additional generated by your development.
Right, but
Okay.
you're saying maybe 80 in the afternoon. If I'm looking at
No.
there,
I'm sorry, I don't think that's what he said.
or 50 peak hours total.
Yeah,
in the
so
afternoon.
in the morning peak hour, we would be looking at 29 exiting the driveway and either going left or right on Royal Road. They could go southbound toward Mock Chunk, making a left out of the driveway, or they could make a right toward Mechanicsville. In the afternoon peak hour, 20 would be exiting during the peak hour. Again, those could be split left southbound or right northbound.
Yeah. So even if you made the presumption that they all turned towards Mechanicsville, you still wouldn't have made that number of 100, is that correct?
That is correct.
But you did study the intersection and the impact?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the cumulative effect. This development's only 50 cars, the next one's only 50 cars, the next one's only 50. And that's a dangerous intersection with some line of sight problems still, so.
And part of it is there are funds to be paid from this project that can finance improvements. That you set this up to be in the Act 209, correct?
Correct. The cumulative effect is also the cumulative effect of collecting those funds and addressing priority projects, priority intersections under the Transportation Capital Improvement Plan by the township.
More questions?
Yeah. Can you give me an example of another development about this size that you've done studies for in this area with one access?
I'd have to take a look at their portfolio. In the last several years, I have done a lot of urban development, downtown development, medical office buildings. I'd have to go back.
I'm looking for
4 or 5
something
years.
similar to this that, we could question, just to see how their traffic's working in and out with one entrance.
I'd have to jog my memory. I apologize.
Okay.
I can do that.
Okay. Now, in regards to some statements that were thrown around about the existing intersection at Mechanicsville, yeah, I know you put traffic dollars to this, and there's a set amount and a rate to figure those out. But when you look at that intersection of Mechanicsville, and at max, you'd probably be putting out $100,000. That barely buys the shovels and the signs, bumps in the road to get anything started there. So it's going to take a lot more than $100,000 to straighten that out down there, because it is a bit of a dangerous intersection, as the previous two commissioners have talked, especially traffic heading towards Mechanicsville from the northwest side of that intersection. When they come through that hump there's a dead spot in there.
Well,
And
yeah.
I- And I know that's there,
Oh,
but.
sorry.
But we're adding more traffic and we're doing improvements. So maybe you'd consider a little more towards cleaning that intersection up.
Yeah. I was going to say, just to be clear, our contribution is, in theory, a fair share contribution based upon the traffic we generate, because obviously, other developments generate those.
Yeah, and-
And obviously, I can't commit to anything.
Well, I understand that, but
Yeah.
I'm just asking for a thought about it, because it would benefit your development too, as far as selling these and keeping those people happy. I mean, this is a two-way street here. For you to be successful and us to keep our residents successful, we have to work together here a little bit. And I'm not making light of the $100,000 there. It's what you're supposed to be. That's the right number. It's not like you're doing
We're
what
not
you're
asking
supposed
for
to
a
do.
break. I understand.
But maybe we could agree on a little more down the road to straighten that mess up down there and get away from this traffic problem altogether. And it would benefit you as far as selling these, because if you're gonna sell these local, the local people know about that intersection, and it just may be enough to say, well, I really don't wanna look at those houses.
Just in comment to that, I hear 100% what you're saying, and I will say that when we had our very initial staff meetings to discuss this project before we made any application, this particular issue was brought to our attention by your township engineer, Mr. Clark, and we had several discussions about it, recognizing that this is in your 209 study and recognizing that preparing a fair share amount for that, it makes sense. But there may be a way that there are some improvements that are already identified that instead of us paying the cash, we could do some of those improvements, and using private dollars can stretch further than public dollars and maybe get some improvement done out there. And that's something we've committed to with Mr. Clark over time. Let's talk about that as we're going through this process to see, is it make more sense for the check, or does it make more sense to do some enhancements that may make that a better situation for people? Does that sound fair?
I think it's more than fair.
And the only other comment I'd make, I know you've asked for example for one access drive. I just did a quick count. There's over 40 houses that are in Brynwood Drive, and then you have the whole St. Stephen's community all come out at one access point. So I don't know if you've had any problems in that area, but what we're providing here, we're actually, even though we have one access on Rural Road, we're providing additional emergency access to a community of 40-some single-family homes that doesn't have the reverse access either at this point. So I think it's going to enhance circulation both ways, particularly in emergency circumstances.
Fair point.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Any questions? No more questions, Jack.
Chuck, do you have anything
That's
further?
it. Pardon me?
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Him, not you. Him.
What's new? Actually, that's all the witnesses that I had. If I could just take a moment to talk to Mr. Canavan to see. Of course. Yeah.
It really is. You're like, it's because of where those houses are. No, and then I'm thinking about the people with the hospital, them saying they can't get over it.
Stuck in all of that. Yeah, if they go that route.
No, and again, I think you have to.
Imagine the land of bus coming
Yeah,
from
thanks.
Rural Road, turning out on the Mechanicsville, making a right to go.
Pretty sure they wouldn't go that route.
You gotta go somewhere for bus pickup. They either gotta come in that way or out that way if they're gonna put bus transportation. Turn a bus there with a.
I hate to be the driver.
Yeah, that's it then. I think we are finished. That ends the direct, and I'd rest and move for the admission of, I think it's A through H?
A through H are what I have, and
Yeah.
those are admitted.
Okay.
Good evening again, everyone. So at this point, all of you identified yourselves as interested parties will have the opportunity to come up and speak if you'd like. I will call on everyone. Everyone will have a chance. Again, I'll ask in a moment for you to raise your hand if you want. I would just ask, first of all, when you come up, you have to state your name and address at the beginning. Second, I ask that to the extent your questions have already been asked and answered, that you not ask them multiple times, just for efficiency, so we can keep the hearing moving. Although, as I said, everyone will have a chance to speak. So if you want to speak, if you'll raise your hand, and I will try and work through in order. I'm just going to move from right to left. So I see a gentleman in a blue shirt. Yep. Well, I'm just going to move from right to left.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Name is William Groller. Last name is Groller, 3933 Mechanicsville Road. And again, this is going to hit some of the things we've hit. This is on a traffic situation. Mechanicsville Road, reiterate, one of the most heavily traveled, one of the most dangerous roads in Whitehall. We lose at least one telephone pole every year. We just lost one in July again. There are numerous fender benders for people trying to make left-hand turns or trying to make right-hand turns off of Mechanicsville Road and the Rural Road, where the people coming behind them don't slow down. So again, that's a huge problem. The other problem we have is people coming down Rural Road, they're not familiar with Rural Road, tend not to stop. That garage on the corner of Rural Road and Mechanicsville Road has been run through 3 times. 2 months ago, we had someone last year, someone who missed the garage, but they basically took down the 2 pylons on the driveway in the 3937. So again, a very dangerous road. The other problem we have with if Mechanicsville Road is the racetrack of Whitehall, then Rural Road is the drag strip of Whitehall. If you go there late at nighttime, there are people doing quarter miles all the time. So you have heavy traffic during the day, and at nighttime you have people who don't know what a speed limit is, both on Rural Road and on Mechanicsville Road. So again, I know that the developers have said they'd be interested in helping to take care of the situation. First of all, you're going to have to talk to PennDOT when it comes to Mechanicsville Road. It's a state road. So if we're talking money, you're probably raising the price of whatever improvements you're going to make right there, because the state's going to be involved in whatever you do. It's not going to just be Whitehall. The other issue I'd make is have some type of traffic control on Rural Road itself. And again, this isn't because of additional people in terms of overall numbers, it's in terms of safety. You already know that the speed limit on Rural Road is also completely ignored. So people coming in and out of that single entrance are going to be at danger of other cars on the road. So if you're considering in traffic improvements, also consider an improvement of some type of three-way stop on Rural Road itself. And that's really all I have right now. Thank you. Everything else has been covered. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. So again, I'll start, the gentleman in the white t-shirt.
My 10-year-old's texted me, that was so important.
Good evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brent Fenstermaker, Fenstermaker. Address is 3926 Mechanicsville Road. Gentlemen, my property, if you look at Exhibit B, and if I could grab a pointer.
Unfortunately, the pointers don't work on the screen,
Okay.
believe it or not.
You scroll down.
You're the one that has the.
Scroll down. I'm the big one.
Yeah,
With
right
the
there
pond.
at the pond, correct.
So I have that property, the property that's right south to it,
Yep.
where the house is? Okay, so my property borders 3/4 of that left side. I've lived on a property for 55 years. You see that pond, that is a natural low area, that's a naturally spring-fed pond. That retention pond, I've heard, I believe, it should, it could, it's not. It's not going to take that water runoff that comes from your main building to the left is all a downslope. There's a natural kind of low area right on the property line there. If we'd walked that right now, and I did before I came out here, there's water laying in there from that little bit of rain we had the last 2 days. Do you have any intentions of connecting that overflow to the Brynwood overflow, which then goes under Mechanicsville Road and falls into the spill-off of Bethel Cemetery property?
Yeah, the down slope of this, that basin will connect into the inlet and pipe that is at the back corner of the
I know you have an
property right
easement,
there.
I know there's an easement
Yeah,
right there, and I know
that's where we would tie into.
it's basically gonna tear up that gentleman's driveway, and I already talked to him.
Yeah, we've had discussions with
Yes.
him already. Yeah.
Yes. I'm just,
And that's, I mean, that is something that, of all the topics that we get to deal with in development, stormwater is probably one of the most heavily regulated that we deal with at this point, between, at the local level with the township engineer and their review, and then at the county and level with the Conservation District and the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission. I am quite confident that what we design will be managing that stormwater per all of the modern regulations that we have. So I think it will improve that situation. I understand exactly what you're talking about. I've walked that corner. I've seen the impoundment that's down there.
Yep.
And we've talked to some of the neighbors and the amount of water they've received in their backyards over time.
you can't walk through my backyard right now,
Right,
because it's water.
very wet down there.
And my fear is with you've got natural groundwater that's absorbing, the cornfield that's absorbing water. My fear is you start putting roofs, sidewalks, roads, and everything else like that, now you're taking away that down water part.
And I will make this comment, and this is not to cut off this conversation, because I'm happy to answer these questions to the commissioners. The hearing tonight is about the use for the property. We are in a whole other process with the subdivision land development ordinance, where all of these things are still being reviewed with the planning commission and have several more iterations to get to that point.
Okay.
And whatever decision this board makes tonight doesn't answer that question. There's still a lot of review that's gonna be occurring in that area. What I will say, though, is when we create our stormwater plans, we are required to look at the pre-development flow, amount of water rolling from the property, based on the land use, okay? So the agricultural land use that's there. And then convert to a post-development flow based on the land use, which then calculates the impervious areas, the rooftops, the fact that it's sod, grass, not, and calculate those rates of runoff, which is obviously an increase because of that. What you also find, though, is along with the basins, we are installing a significant number of underground pipes with stone bed around them, et cetera, that act as natural aquifer diversions within that, and you do see a change that occurs. I will say, in my experience in the last 20 years in situations like this, our experience has been the downstream neighbors have a better stormwater situation post-development than they did pre-development because of the number of controls that we have had to put into place in a community like this.
Okay,
And I'd be happy to meet with you and walk the property if there's specific areas of concern as well for you.
No, you answered my question that you're actually going to tie it into the other
Into
storm
that
drains.
inlet, exactly.
So
Yep.
you basically have, you're adding on an additional water basin onto that.
But what we're doing also at the same time, remember, these are detention basins. So you can size and hold back stormwater and then release it over a period of time. And this is going to be a managed release basin. So it slows down that release. Instead of, right now, any water that lands on that farm field that doesn't get absorbed runs off at one time. This will all go into a basin and then be met out based on the discharge size, the pipe size discharge, over a longer period of time, which will prevent flooding downstream because it slows that discharge rate over a period of time.
All right, that's all the questions I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
Who has their hands up? Okay. Come on.
Hello.
Hello. Karen Poshefko, should I spell it? Poshefko, 3303 Musselman Court. I live on Fellowship Community Property, and Mr. Canavan and I have had many positive conversations about my concern about cutting the trees down. I think there's overwhelming information in the press, valid science, that we need to preserve trees and plant more trees. So I think WB is doing a really good job of limiting the amount of pervious surfaces, planting trees. I think that's all a good thing. But if you really look at the plan before and after, and you just kind of hold your pencil over, I'm guessing 75% of those trees are going to be cut down, and I have a concern about that. I think it's going to negatively impact the aesthetics of Fellowship. Many of my fellow residents walk that area. People sit there in their wheelchairs and they look at the trees and listen to the birds. We have hawks in there. We have wildlife. I just think it's going to be a negative impact on our community. It's going to increase our temperatures. It's going to increase our pollution. The comprehensive plan does state that it is recommended that trees not be clear cut. I realize there's not an ordinance attached to that. Nonetheless, it is a plan and it is a recommendation, and I think it should be considered. The Lehigh Valley Planning Commission has a new initiative to plant street trees. Again, reduce pollution, cooling, traffic flow, regulation. I'm a member of the EAC. I'm also on the Birdtown Committee, and you folks signed an ordinance for Birdtown where we're supposed to be preserving our wild spaces and enhancing bird habitat rather than clear cutting it. I would really like to see, and I've asked this before at one of the planning commissions, I would like to have a forester, a certified forester, walk that site and just do an analysis of those trees. Maybe they're all in bad shape and they should be cut down. But I think before we lose something, we should know what we have. So overall, I think this is a good use. I do have a concern about traffic, but I think it's the lesser of some of the other evils. But I would like to see less units and keep the trees. Thanks.
I've had many conversations with Karen. She's been wonderful to talk to. She actually gave me a great book to read, The Nature of Oaks, which I did complete. I've been collecting my acorns, actually, and my children have also. But I will say, the project, we are going to be planting over 290 trees on the current landscape plan on the property, distributed throughout the property, not just in the one corner of the property. Also, the analysis I think you'll find from KCE when that's submitted is they've found that except for the upper corner where we're trying to preserve as many trees as we can, most of the rest of the trees are not hardwoods, they're not as in good a shape. But there is a pocket up there, and we will be clearing some of them. I'm not trying to hide from that fact. But I think we've also commented that we will look to preserve some of the larger mature trees where we have a line on the plan, but we need to walk that with the engineer's office as we're developing to make sure that we're not just needlessly removing something, if we can shift some grading one way or the other a little bit, and that we've also committed to doing. So I think we're trying to be as sensitive as possible within the confines of your ordinance, and as I said, we're planning in excess of 290 trees on the site.
Hello, my name is Victor Lapadula. It's L-A-P-A-D as in David, U-L-A. Thank you. And presently, I'm the only home on Rural Road right now. I'm that little square right there to the left. And I could,
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Over here.
Oh, yes, sir.
I'm the voice from.
Yes, 3708 Rural Road. There we go.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And traffic is definitely an issue, and I could attest to what the neighbor said about traffic going up Rural Road. I don't even hear them getting out of first gear as they come up to Fellowship. So a light at that intersection might help. Also, I'm very concerned about the tree line right next to my house. Now, there's 5 or 6 homes that are going to be right on that proposed site. You talked about keeping the good trees, and there were some ash trees that we had cut down because they're going away. So the plan to plant trees, are you going to save some of that line there?
Yeah,
Okay.
we walked that line, and actually, to your benefit,
Yes.
most of the best trees and the larger trees are on your property, not ours.
Thank you. Thank you.
But we will also be looking to supplement within that area to, it's not just keeping the mature trees, but other sightline, so maybe some lower growing trees also, just to give some privacy to both sides.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
The information you provided about the traffic coming out of that development, did you take into account employees, medical staff, maintenance people that are going to be working there? Is that more traffic? Is
That's
it
all
not?
taken into account by the
Okay.
traffic here. But I will say, that was one of the reasons we like this use over the other uses. This doesn't have 24-hour staffing or use, like where you have medical facilities where you have people coming and going all the time.
Right.
Yes, you will have delivery men, just like you do in any other residential development, but there's no reoccurring staff coming and going from the community.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Last one? Okay.
Uh-oh.
Mario Spagnoletti, S-P-A-G-N-O-L-E-T-T-I. We were just talking about.
I'm sorry,
this
can you
wooded
just
section.
state your address?
Pardon?
Your address, sir. You need to give your address.
Oh, my address too, 3508 Fellowship Community. We just talked about these woods again, and you had mentioned to me one time about 85 feet.
It's between 85 and 110 feet along that property line where the nearest house
Now,
would be.
which way? Is that from the center of the road in, or
From the edge of the
the
property.
long way?
The edge of the property line of Fellowship into our site.
So some of them woods are gonna be preserved?
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's what I was worried about.
One more? Okay.
I'm Dale Wagner, live at 3326 Brynwood. You talked about phase 1, phase 2.
Correct.
What's the transition on that water issue between those phases? Because I live down,
I know right where you live, Mr. Wagner. We've seen the pictures of your backyard, which I do think is going to get better with our development, just as a start. Mr. Wagner lives just behind what is shown as the retention basin that's being circled on the plan right now off of Brynwood Drive. The reason we phased it the way we have is so that we can break it up by stormwater basins. Everything that is heading in your direction now is sort of in phase 1, okay? And there'll be 2 stormwater basins that constructed prior to the start of that, the roads and whatnot
Right.
going in. And then everything in phase 2 goes to what I would call the upper basin, or the one that's shown in the sort of southeast area.
Behind
And
my
that, so
house.
that divides the 2 jobs up that way.
yeah, so what's gonna happen, like in between that phase where all the trees will be down, I mean, the cornfield will be leveled, you'll have all that construction going on. Are you gonna have that retention pond activated?
Before we can, so process of construction, that basin will be developed as what's known as an E&S basin, an erosion sedimentation basin. That's one of the very first steps we have to take, is to install that basin so that when we do disturb upstream of it, we're controlling any of the construction runoff that would occur. And then that stays in that condition until we have stabilized the site sufficiently so that we can then convert it to its permanent condition.
Because like I said, that my neighbor still he has a mini waterfall in his backyard every time it rains.
Right.
And we get that river running down behind the houses.
Well, between our silt sock and the diversion swales that we have to put in, plus the basin, the goal is, once we open that site up, stormwater is not running off to the adjacent properties. It's going into our basin for sediment management.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. With that, Mr. Schock, do you have any additional evidence you'd like to offer?
No, no additional evidence.
So you rest, you
I
close your
rest,
case. I'll ask the board now if you have anything else you'd like to offer before we close the hearing.
Anyone? We're good.
So at this point, are you prepared to make a decision? Your options are you make a decision. You're required to make a decision within 45 days of the close of the hearing. You can make a decision tonight, or you could reserve it to next month if you saw a need to. No additional evidence or testimony would be taken. The hearing has been closed. If you have questions for me, you can ask them here. If you want legal advice, we could do that in executive session as well.
We have two ways of going about this. I could do a simple poll. Is someone willing to make a motion to approve this? Or we can go to executive session and discuss this briefly. What's the will of the board?
For the conditional use, we're just giving the conditional use. As they said, they'll be back before planning and back before us for all the intricacies of this.
This is only, your job as the board here is as the zoning board, and it's whether or not the applicant has met their burden to show that the conditions in the ordinance for this use have been met. If they have, you are obligated to approve the use. They will have to come back, as they've said multiple times, they're gonna have to come back for land development approval. They've started that process, but they'll have to come back.
Would you like to go to a brief executive to discuss this, or would someone like to make a motion? Well, it's up to the
I'll
board.
make a
It's the will of the
motion
board.
that this is approved.
For conditional use, and I'll second that motion.
Okay. Please poll the board.
Commissioner Sloniker, aye. Commissioner Ginder?
Yes?
Commissioner Warren? Aye. Commissioner Fisher?
Nay.
Commissioner Attia?
Yes.
And President Marks.
Yes.
So we have 5 ayes, 1 nay. Motion passes.
Thanks
Thank
for
you,
your
gentlemen.
time.
Much for your time,
Have a great
gentlemen.
night.
See you at land development.
If there's anyone here that would like to leave, that's here relative to this, I'm talking to the crowd. You're free to go. You're free to go. Thank you for coming.
Frank, you heard a lot of the comments here. You know where the.
We're already there, yeah.
All right,
We
thank
had
you.
the same ones. And this is what we had, similar to when.
Anybody want to take a break?
We have like temporary adjourn? How does that work?
This gets you through that door and then hit the light switch if it doesn't come on automatically to get it. Or you can go the other way. It's entirely up to you.
Would've got whacked with a right.
Yeah, we're gonna take a brief break here. It'll only be momentarily.
Okay, oh, I know where you live. He's good at it.
Well, and I think that did a lot.
Oh my God, yeah.
Oh, see, he's back.
Told you you could have dinner.
Two dinners.
And then the other ones, these this is good print. Command.
Do you need a water? Brandon, do you need a water? Good.
So, yeah, they have a project out on Veracruz Road, spotless. It's perfect, they just, every little detail, every spoonful of dirt, paint, what do these homes go for? I have no idea, they're probably like a little cheese.
Yeah, they're not as big as.
Hey, everybody likes the
Hey, they put a great product together, I really think. So,
We're good.
they've been behaving.
I feel smarter for some reason.
This is a mess.
Have their next meeting with the township.
I just want to go home.
Okay.
How you sitting for vodka?
That's my big concern that's going to speak about tonight. That's a separate issue.
Okay, Scotch.
Because,
They haven't come back since the last time they went through it. They haven't resubmitted it.
Okay, because I know that there's going to be a road
Hang on.
down.
Because
Outside of
we
the
got some
corn
ordinances first.
They talked about, but it didn't get approved.
You're halfway through the second page.
Yeah, kind of.
You're halfway through the second page.
Because I was
Until they
concerned about
resubmitted something.
yeah, 160
You're close.
homes versus the hospital.
I think they're tired enough, they just want to get it
And
over with.
what the traffic is
All
like,
right.
by cross one, that's something to provide. I don't think these guys have any idea of the. They tried to explain it to me, they didn't listen,
Everybody's quiet. No, it's nothing like that.
People are angry with each other.
You know, it was cloudy, so it's like, is that gonna be good? But it took away,
Chat.
the lights going
Okay,
through the clouds. Pretty-
That's all.
Not necessary.
I'm old, but I'm bigger than both of you.
Thanks, Tom.
Oh, Randy, the Aaron Rodgers era. He got taken off in a cart. Oh,
really?
No.
Order.
Get a boot already.
Oh, my God.
JETS, Jets. All in.
Yes, football.
I don't feel so bad about it.
What could go wrong?
Bring in the young guy.
Hey, that tennis player, 34 years old.
And besides, he's not getting somebody pulling his,
I'll tell you what, as far as
gonna get moving.
prepared for the office, that was the best guy.
Maybe a lot of them.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
And then.
Nobody's here for this long. The company doesn't.
Throw up on him, don't throw up on him.
I don't either, but you'd think somebody'd be here for it unless they called it
Watching these
off.
guys that were just,
This is that one guy in the back
Larissa,
sitting by the
you all
TV.
set? Okay.
So much better than anybody that I've ever had.
These folks here.
Good to hear from.
Are you gentlemen ready to go? Mr. Gross, you ready to go? Did you want to say something?
Yeah, if I can.
So I'd just like to make a note, and we'll ask that the minutes reflect that on July 25th, 2023, Whitehall Township received an agricultural security area application from Brad Stanko for his property located at 4590 Spring Street. The application has been sent to North Whitehall Township. Thank you.
Thank you. Courtesy of the floor?
Donna Wright?
I'm okay at the moment, thank you.
Okay, I just want to note, comments on non-agenda items will be strictly monitored to no more than 3 minutes per person, so if you could be respectful of that.
Rob Pelagian? This guy has to learn how to print, too. I know who you are, otherwise I wouldn't have got that right. Would have been Pilgrim.
Rob Pelagian, 415 Oakwood Drive. I'm going to monitor my time carefully. I have one question. What's the status of the police station sale?
Hasn't moved yet. Still working with Public Works and how to present it for sale. If we're gonna clean it out or if we're not.
I mean, it's a township asset that needs to be disposed of. It's costing us money, and it's hard for me to believe that for as long as it's been vacated, that we still have it. I understand it's a process, but can we move this along? Is there something that we need to do to make this happen? I mean, does it have to get struck by lightning and burned to the ground for it to get sold, or what? The last time I was here, I heard that it needed a legal description written.
That was done.
Okay. So now it's just a matter of cleaning it out?
Preparing the bid documents, yeah.
Okay. Do we have a timeline on this?
Hopefully before the end of the year, yes.
Okay, I guess that's all I have.
Noted. Thank you.
Brent Fenstermaker,
He left. He was here at WB.
Bill Groller,
He left WB.
A. Kupak,
Start the clock.
Anthony Kopak, 3763 Dogwood Drive, Whitehall. First off, I'd like to thank the commissioners for the moment of silence for all the people that lost their lives today, and for all the people that are struggling to cope with losing loved ones, and people that have health issues and emotional and mental problems, all because of the events of 9/11. And I'd like to go back to last meetings and thank the board for their insight on their vote for the land preservation, of how they kind of processed it and came to their conclusion of yes or no. I thought that was very insightful, and usually you don't get that. Usually you just get a party line vote, a yes or no, and I found that, I enjoyed listening to all that. Going on with the 9/11 comments here, we keep referring to this fund we have as the Lafarge Fund. I find that a little disrespectful to anybody that lost somebody overseas, to the war on terror, and to these attacks, being that Lafarge was a company that was paying money to the terrorists so they can continue to operate their cement plant over there. I believe maybe we should consider calling it something other than the Lafarge Fund. Getting on to other items, down on Range Road, just past the recycling center, I don't know who's responsible for the walkway there and the vegetation that's along that walkway, but there's a dead tree, and there's a tree limb that's just hanging there that's broken off, that could just fall down onto somebody that's walking down that trail. Whose vegetation is that along that walkway?
Lee, correct me, is that Abrams Group? The macadam walking path behind their venue? The macadam is ours? Are you referring to the macadam walkway?
All right, but there's a tree branch, there's a dead tree there, and then there's also a broken branch off that dead tree that's just loose, hanging over this walkway.
I will, Mr. Mayor, can we talk to Public Works and see if they could go down there and police that area?
I'll make sure they get that done.
We'll address that situation, sir.
Okay, and also, on Lehigh Street, right by Skataway, there's a tree, it can't be more than 6 feet, not even 6 feet above the sidewalk.
I know exactly what you're talking about. That's private property, though. We'll have to.
Well, the tree's got, the ordinance is 14 feet high. Or maybe not above the sidewalk, but I should be able to walk down the sidewalk without walking into the street because the tree's so low.
What area?
Right at Skataway,
At Skateaway.
on that sidewalk that goes down there, and trust me, I don't believe that sidewalk going down there would meet the current ADA standards. There are narrow spots where a pole is. I don't know how a wheelchair would get through there. And right where this tree is, the concrete's all broken. The water company was there because there's blue lines there. They were laying something out. All right, I know I'm getting the eye for time, so. And I want to thank was ever responsible for fixing that darn hole in Rural Road. And now we're just gonna have countless more new holes with this development. But we'll address them when they occur. Thank you.
Can I make a comment quick? I don't want to leave a thing on the Lafarge Fund hanging in the air. I don't know if everyone's aware, but Mr. Kopeck is correct. The larger, greater Lafarge group was like paying off groups overseas, I believe ISIS, and to be allowed to operate. I do want to say that our Lafarge obviously had nothing to do with that. But I also want to say that Lafarge, I guess it's wholesome now. I mean, I'm not opposed to a name change of the fund at any point, for whatever it reflects. But I also just didn't want to leave that hanging out there. So I'd be open if long-term we wanted to change that, or if this is an institutional thing where we just know it as the Lafarge Fund. But I think it would at least be worthy of discussion.
I'm going to defer to council. Is there anything that we can do or we need to do in order to just change the nomenclature here? Or, I mean,
There's nothing official, it's just
Okay.
what it's been known as. If you
Okay.
want to call it something different in the future,
Not something that has to be discussed tonight, but I mean, I do understand, and I understand the multiple issues. So.
And at the same token, you know, I understand that, you know, probably a little better being a veteran, but you have to also look at the whole picture of over the years. Lafarge and the cement companies before Lafarge have been very good to Whitehall. Yeah, we have some cement dust, and, you know, so does Northampton, and that's just part of making cement, so I don't even want to get involved in that. But, you know, that whole cement and park up there was donated from that cement company. So you have to remember some of these things that happened years ago from these companies too, you know, and just not rip out and underneath their foot. You know, if they went out wholesale and created, you know, problems and stuff, but, you know, I don't think there's that much there. I think you also have to look at some of the good that these companies have done over the years. You want to talk about history in Whitehall and stuff. This is part of the history, what these companies put into Whitehall in the 1800s and 1900s to give us some of the playgrounds and give up some of the streets. And yeah, we got quarry holes, and yeah, so does everybody else whoever mines cement. But there was a lot of good done. I'll cut it short at that point.
Bill, if I can just make note, they contend that they have 100 years more of quarrying in Whitehall.
Jobs. You know, those jobs could leave the area too. I mean, no, yeah, I know we all don't like quarry holes, but it's what it is. I mean, they're starting to mine for lithium at places too. I mean, quarries are quarries, and we need these minerals to live. And I think the companies we've had here in Whitehall, I think they've been very good to our community. Between providing jobs and providing things the community needed, they seem to have walked right along with us, and that's just my opinion on all of this.
okay. Next.
One
Do you
more
have
thing.
something?
Lehigh Street, if we're going to do some private enforcement of that tree, a while ago, I noticed that the weeds in the sidewalk were pretty high. I don't know if that's still the condition now, but it's blighted.
Lehigh.
Is that what you're talking about, by the sidewalk going down Lehigh?
Right.
Yeah.
Tree there.
Yeah, they do a great job maintaining the lawn. It's just, maybe if the weeds are
I thought
excessively.
you were
No.
transitioning to another Lehigh.
No, thanks, that's good.
Okay.
Next courtesy of the floor.
Diane Schwab,
Ms. Schwab.
gone. Said Belmont Glen. My best guess is it's Rod somebody at 3437 St. Stephen's.
Gone.
And the last one lives at 3413 St. Stephen's.
Gone.
Okay.
Okay. With that being said, going to move on to public hearing and voting on ordinances. Bill number 27-2023, this is the second hearing. An ordinance authorizing the township mayor to accept a deed of dedication from Jeffrey F. Voice and Mary B. Henninger along Washington Street for the purpose of right-of-way and future road construction. Do I have a motion?
I'll move Fisher.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it, Warren.
Any comments from the board? Any comments from the floor? Can you please poll the board?
Commissioner Fisher? Aye. Commissioner Warren?
Aye.
Commissioner Sloniker? Aye. Commissioner Attia?
Yes.
Commissioner Ginder?
Yes.
Yes.
Bill passes 6 ayes, 0 nays.
Bill number 31-2023, an ordinance deferring the required installation of curbing and sidewalks for 156 plus or minus feet along the Munchuck Road frontage of 150 Munchuck Road as required in Chapter 21, Section 21-16 of the codified ordinances of Whitehall Township. Do I have a motion?
I'll move Fisher.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any comments from the board? Any comments from the floor? Please poll the board.
Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Ginder?
Yes.
Commissioner Warren? Aye. Commissioner Sloniker? Aye. Commissioner Ginder, Attia?
Yes.
And President Marks?
Yes.
Bill passes 6 ayes, 0 nays.
Bill number 32-2023, an ordinance authorizing the acceptance of a proposal for the purchase of automated external defibrillators, AEDs, in accordance with Section 3.20 in the Home Rule Charter, which requires authorization of acquisitions in excess of $25,000 by ordinance. Do I have a motion?
I'll move.
Do I have a second? I'll second. Any comments from the board? Any comments from the floor? Please poll the board.
Commissioner Attia?
Yes.
Commissioner Marks?
Yes.
Commissioner Ginder?
Yes.
Commissioner Sloniker? Aye. Commissioner Warren?
Aye.
And that's it, because you don't count, no. Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Okay. Bill passes 6 ayes, 0 nays.
What am I saying on that one?
Public hearings and voting on resolutions. Resolution number 3276, a resolution conditionally approving the land development / major subdivision plan of MacArthur Commons redevelopment 2, located at 2601 and 2631 MacArthur Road. Do I have a motion?
I'll move.
Go ahead.
Sloniker, Ginder.
Did you say it too?
Yes, he did. Any comments from the board?
Is anybody here from that development?
Would you like to speak, sir?
If anyone has any questions?
You could come forward. Please identify yourself.
My name is Todd Dratch from Abrams Realty and Development. We own the MacArthur Commons Shopping Center and MacArthur Town Center across the street. We were originally made aware of this project, and we've been trying to buy this for several years from Walmart. It was a big, excessive parking lot with nothing in it that was creating a lot of truck parking problems. And we finally got it under contract with Walmart, and we found some good users to fit there, and we feel like it really finishes out the shopping center and achieves many goals with regard to adding sidewalks, with regard to not having areas where these trucks can park overnight, and one of the uses is a car wash, which we know will be good use for the township. There's a Kids Empire there, and then we have 2 other retail buildings. And we enjoy developing in Whitehall. I mean, we've had a great run for the last several years in our centers, and the more we could upgrade them, the better. We love developing up here, and if anyone has any questions or any properties, we're interested.
I have a few questions. So, first off, I have really no objections or any issues with the sites. I especially like to see properties that have already been somewhat developed or stormwater covered be developed rather than, we'll say, undeveloped land at this point. So, my main objection is the absolute destruction of trees for this property. This was yours?
Well, no, yeah,
But-
for that, I mean, this first property's all concrete.
Yeah, I know, but a tree had to die somewhere for this, sir. A tree had to die somewhere.
We'll plant a few around for you.
Thank you. But no, but in all seriousness, one of the things I do want to ask and inquire, so we are having some pushes for electric vehicle charging stations in the township. Whitehall does not have any at its retail facilities as of this time. Would you be willing to either put them in, work with a group to put them in, or would you be willing to work with the township, specifically our Economic Industrial Development Authority, to put them in or apply for grants?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that question, because Giant has come to us to ask us to put 2 in front of their store.
Okay.
The answer is yes. Anything
Okay.
we can do for the township, as long as it works.
Okay.
You know what I mean? We're happy to do it. If we can find a location that's agreeable to everybody.
I do want to make you aware of our, it's called WITICTA, Whitehall Township Industrial Commercial Development Authority, which is looking into some grant work for charging stations. And Commissioner Warren could also comment on that a little bit. But I just want you to make aware of this. If you're thinking about this, this could be an opportunity going forward.
Yeah, we're open to it on both properties, on both sides of MacArthur Boulevard. I mean, we have a big parking field across the street as well.
Okay.
So anywhere the township wants them, we're fine with it.
That's all I have. Thank you. Thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for coming up here and working with us.
We love it. We love working up here. Wish every township was like Whitehall.
The only comment I have,
I wish every place that we had let me start over. You're a good thing.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Thank you.
Seriously. They do a great job.
We very much appreciate that. Thank you.
thank you for investing in Whitehall.
We love it.
Thank you very much,
Thank you for the working relationship.
and your facilities are first class.
Thank you very much.
You really turned them around. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to follow up on the comments I made last week about the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission comments and Atlanta comments, that there's some crosswalks that faded over time that would be nice to be refreshed on your property.
Absolutely.
And there was some, working out some issues with appropriate bus stops.
Yep, we will.
And
We're gonna comply with
yeah, I'd like to
Atlanta.
see that happen soon, well, along with the project, not too far on the back end.
Yeah.
And that we know what if they need a pad for a bus stop, that's part of the construction. That's not something that we have to figure out how to fund on the back end ourselves, so.
Yeah, we're gonna put the bus stop station in, but just to be clear on where we are with approvals, the Walmart's never closed out their basin. I don't know how much aware the board is or not, and to get this project done, we've taken that on ourselves to get involved and figure out what it is. I think we finally figured out what the issue is, and I think we should be coming to resolution on the issue extremely shortly. And Walmart let us step up to figure out that problem. And I think everybody believed that, not to get technical, that the forebay was not holding water. And after all our research, the pump is on and it's taking the water. So we have to figure out where the water's going. We will be working with Frank.
Right.
And we need to close out our NPDS permit, Walmart's NPDS permit, to get our application in, so we're probably not starting the project till the summer. So as soon as we start the project, we'll put those improvements in that are requested.
One last thing, I noticed Giant installed a portable security camera. That seems to be a good deterrent, maybe. You're seeing more often in shopping centers, so we really don't have a requirement, but it would be nice to start seeing some of those safety effects built into new development. So
Yeah, it's a, Giant just implemented that in the last 6 months or so, maybe 9 months. It's a visual on what's going on, so if
Right.
something's going on in the parking lot, and then it can speak, they can talk through it. And, I mean, from a safety issue, we're very happy with the development in Whitehall. We feel it's a very safe place. But security is critical everywhere. So, you know, if our tenants come to us and they want to do something like that, I mean, we're happy to do it. I'm glad it's not objectionable, because it's not pretty, but it works.
The other thing is you talked about some of the connectivity with some of the missing links in the sidewalk. I talked to Todd about that. They're going to take care of that
Great,
as well.
thank you. That's all I have.
Getting back to the Cyclops, Mr. Abrams was not even aware of this because myself and Police Chief Marks investigated and found where the source of that came from. No one knew where the alien spaceship landed from until I reached out to Mr. Abrams. If you could convey to him how grateful we are for him being such a great community partner. Thank you. Any more questions? Any questions from the floor? Please poll the board. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sloniker, aye. Commissioner Ginder?
Yes.
Warren? Aye. Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Rtia?
Yes.
President Marks?
Yes.
Resolution passes 6 ayes, 0 nays.
Thank you very much. Worth
Have a
the
great
wait
night.
tonight. Thank you.
Resolution number 3277, a resolution transferring funds within the general fund and capital reserve fund to provide for appropriations to meet unanticipated current fiscal year expenses constituting budget transfer 2023-01. Do I have a motion?
I'll move.
Do I have a second?
I'll say.
Any questions from the board? Any questions from the floor? Please poll the board.
Commissioner Ginder?
Yes.
Commissioner Rtia?
Yes.
Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Warren?
Aye.
Commissioner Sloniker, aye. And President Marks?
Yes.
Resolution passes 6 ayes, 0 nays.
Resolution number 3278, a resolution approving the emergency operations plan of Whitehall Township, Lehigh County, Pennsylvania. Do I have a motion?
I'll move, Fisher.
Do I have a second?
I'll say.
Any questions from the board?
Yes, I just want to say from last week, I think the plan is fine. I appreciate everything that Chris does. The only thing I want to emphasize from last week, and I want to follow up with Chris and the mayor on this, is that we just have some kind of a record or documentation of what the township did during COVID just as a long-term record. So, I mean, I'll keep following up on that personally, but as long as the memories are still fresh, this was probably the most disruptive thing that happened to the township in the last 50 to 100 years that really affected us, so I really think this should at least be documented, so that's all I got.
Any more questions from the board? Any questions from the floor? Please poll the board.
Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Rtia?
Yes.
Commissioner Ginder?
Yes.
Commissioner Sloniker, aye. Commissioner Warren?
Aye.
President Marks?
Yes.
Resolution passes 6 ayes, 0 nays.
Resolution number 3279, a resolution authorizing the mayor or the deputy mayor to execute documents necessary to enter into an agreement of sale for the purchase of agricultural conservation easement for property owned by Weinhofer Farms LLC and John G. Weinhofer and Lisa C. Weinhofer. Do I have a motion?
Second it, Warren.
Any questions from the board?
We have everything straightened out down with the county. I mean,
Can't come forward here.
well, you better.
As far as I know, yes, we do, and I apologize for not having been here at the last meeting.
Shift identifiers.
Oh, I'm sorry. Donna Wright. I'm from the Lehigh County Farmland Preservation Office, 4234 Dorney Park Road, Allentown. On the resolution, it is just property owned by Weinhofer Farms LLC. John and Lisa's name is not on that deed, so just for clarification.
So at this point, county records show their names on there, but
They
the agreement does require that the county's going to provide a title search, so, I mean,
Right,
if,
the title search, and we
if
have.
prior to the deed, it's only Weinhofer Farms, that doesn't legally impact this. I
Right.
just needed to have the resolution match current county records and
It There's, the 4 pins were sold in August. I have the new deed, which I did transfer to your office, and I have the tax, federal tax ID for the creation of Weinhofer Farms. So from my end, that's how I had to put on the agreement of sale. Whatever you guys have to do for the resolution, that's fine.
I did see that today.
Yeah.
This resolution was already
Right, no, that's fine.
advertised.
More names are fine.
Yep.
It won't impact for this, when we get down to the actual agreement sale.
We'll make sure ultimately that the grantor on the deed, through the title policy you're going to provide,
Right.
matches current record owner. So
Right.
it's
Just that
not a
was-
legal problem.
Right, that was my only comment, to make sure that we had all the correct names on there. Because they do have their own farm section, but for this, the 24-acre parcel is not part of this preservation. Okay, that was my only clarification. Other than that, if anybody else had any other questions, whomever you do authorize for sign would not only sign the agreement of sale, but whoever then would come to the settlement for the township with a check then would also come at that period of time, whether it's yourself, because the township attorney is always one of the parties that signs the agreement as well.
So in Whitehall, it's the mayor, and then I also
Right.
authorize the deputy mayor.
Right,
So to the extent I need to attest something or provide
right,
an
then you
opinion
just
as
attested
solicitor,
as the
I can
attorney,
do
right.
that. Correct.
No, okay.
Any
There's
more
any-
questions from the floor? Mr. Schneider?
Ken Snyder, 4272 Abigail Lane. My questions tonight are not whether we do this or don't do this. It's a known fact that we're going to be doing it. But I reviewed the agreement of sale, and as I reviewed the agreement of sale, there's some questions. And some of these questions would be of the solicitor and some from the board itself. So, Jack, do you have the agreement itself in front of you?
I do.
Okay, on page one of the questions is, it's 154 acres, and I just heard the county say that they're preparing a new deed, and in the agreement of sale, there's a deed of easement. Is there a new deed being prepared that it's going to take all of the properties, the 4, and combining them into one?
What I understand happened, and this is what we were discussing, is that the parcels that were in the names of the individuals have been transferred into their company. So it's not a new deed, it's that they did a transfer from themselves into their LLC.
When they bought it from Shock, it went from Shock to Weinhofer Farm LLC direct.
So it's not a new deed, it's
It
simply,
is merely the deed that was.
right,
was
and the
purchased
the county assessment records have not been updated to reflect
So,
that yet. But it,
and I'm okay with that. The question is, when you did the transfer, did you keep it as 4 separate parcels?
That's right, you're going to have to come up to the microphone so we could,
I'm sorry.
so, and let me try, this transfer hasn't happened yet, Mr. Snyder, so.
I understand.
You know, the agreement of sale is ultimately for, as I understand it, and I will be confirming this before closing, that Weinhofer Farms LLC will be granting the easement
Yes.
to the county and the township.
Right, and the question is that if they are going to combine 4 properties on a deed that she's preparing separately.
No, they're not combining them. They're not combining them.
So I got 2 different answers.
No, I'm sorry, there were 4 parcels.
Yes,
Some of them were owned by the Weinhofers to begin with, I believe, and some were, they were all owned by the,
All 100, okay. The Weinhofers own one 24-acre parcel, which is not involved in this transaction in any way whatsoever. The 4 pins that were part of this conversation from the beginning was owned by the Shock family, the developers.
4 parcels.
4 parcels.
Correct.
The Weinhofer Farms LLC purchased those 4 parcels
Yes.
in April.
Yes.
Okay, that is the property deed. The deed of easement
Yes.
has those 4 parcels as part of the deed of easement.
Okay.
It does nothing concerning combining for anything.
It's not a
that was-
consolidation.
It's
That's
not a
fine.
consolidation,
Then I'm
okay?
okay.
So this is just for the saying that the development rights for those 4 parcels have been sold.
and
So
if I,
there's 2 separate kind of,
if I can just say that if you look further in the agreement, and maybe you'll get there, you know, there is a requirement before closing that the county is going to get a title search and provide a title
Right.
policy. I don't have all the answers on the chain of title until I receive that.
My
So at
biggest-
some point, that will be, all those questions will also be.
So my biggest question was, and Rob and I were talking outside, and he was educating me, because it's a deed of easement, it's different than the deed of fee simple.
Correct.
And if they were going to combine it all, then it would require a saldo position, and if it doesn't, I'm perfectly fine. That was just a question.
Yep, that's fair.
Okay, so I'm fine. You may want to hang around. Okay?
Some counties do require all of them to be combined, we do not.
I'm okay. It's not, so I'm perfectly fine. The agreement calls for something called associated cost. If the associated cost is reasonable, the state will reimburse. If it's not considered to be reasonable, you will have additional fees in this contract to pay besides the amount. So your amount that you're giving them, it is that plus the associated cost
Okay,
that comes
can-
with it.
Can I interrupt on that?
Sure.
In the Lehigh County, since they started this program in 1990, the Lehigh County only paid once additional, what they call incidentals.
Yes.
And that was because at the time, it was someone who didn't want their money all at one time, and they asked to get interest rates, in which case we paid that.
I
But as
understand.
far as incidentals, which is what this refers to.
Yes.
The state, at this point in time, has paid 100% of those incidentals, whatever they may be, whether they've been $110 or they've been $25,000.
Well, in this case, it's $32,000.
Correct, and
So
they are paying all of that.
I understand, but the agreement says that if they don't, they could be liable for 22% of $32,000. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
No more nor less, okay? The other arrangement is the applications, as far as the ground meeting all the requirements, I'm assuming that was all done. In the agreement on page 4, it says that in here, that you agree that everything was done necessary. The question I have is, did North Whitehall approve the agreement to them, and did they sign it at this particular point?
Sorry, which, I'm on
Says-
page 4, what, can you?
Page 4,
Yep.
paragraph number 2, a local government unit has been created as an agricultural security area.
You're asking about the Ag Security Act.
Yes.
Correct. Right now, North Whitehall has the Ag Security application for this property. This property will not and cannot go to final settlement. No money will pass hands until that has been agreed. And that time period runs out very beginning of November. So we will not look at any kind of settlement to occur before that happens. This board has to have, and the title search has to have a recorded Ag Security area for this farm, or it will not qualify for the program.
I understand, but the agreement states that it has been done, and it's not done. That's all I'm saying. Paragraph says the local government has created it. It has not been approved by North Whitehall and needs to be. It doesn't say subject to. That's all I'm telling you.
Well, nothing is finalized until the title comes in.
But you're signing an agreement of sale, making a statement that says that it's been done, and we know it's not. That's all I'm saying.
I can ask if that can be changed to say prior to closing.
We cannot change the language. This
That's-
language is from the state, but you can wait and sign the paperwork until the agreement, until the Ag Security area comes through and you have it in your hand.
You've said that before. I don't want to argue with you tonight, okay, but there is an addendum to the contract that was produced which changes some of the terms in the agreement. So in the addendum, you could add a clause that says subject to, and I'd be perfectly fine. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, which addendum are you speaking?
There's an
So he's
addendum.
referring to addendum number 1?
Yes.
Which, but
Correct.
Mr. Snyder, I can check if that can be
No.
added to addendum 1.
No, all of the addendums and everything else is 100% approved prior and cannot be changed from this contract.
Look, guys, it's $385,000. You're signing a contract. I get it, okay? It says in here that it's been done. It's either done or it's not done. And if it's not done, it's subject to. You sit down and you tell me you can't, but you added a clause in here that you can put a building up to 10% of the total arrangement. You added your own clause. So all I'm telling you is, all I'm telling you is that this states that it's been done, and it's not. It's not done, it's not approved, and it's not signed over in North Whitehall Township. No more, no less. Now, if your attorney feels very comfortable that this can be taken care of, then I'm fine. But all I'm saying to you is, as of now, it's not done. You're assuming it is. You're assuming that they signed what you sent them, but it isn't done. That's all I'm telling you. If you go to the next page, page 5,
I guess, Mr. Snyder, I'll just let me respond to the board. If you approve this tonight, you can certainly approve it subject, as with everything, to confirming that these requirements are done in that one. Either, and I'm not going to argue with you, but either the state would have to agree to an amendment there, or we'll have to wait to signed until North Whitehall takes that step, which I understand.
and I'm perfectly fine if you make your own subject too. It's great, just so it's covered.
One
That's all
of
I'm
those
saying.
two would be my suggestion.
Okay? Throughout the whole agreement, Article 7 and other places in the deed, there are certain rights that are given to the farmer. The one that concerns me, or that's in here, is the equine activities. And I don't know the answer to this question, but maybe, I'm sure our solicitor can answer. When you sign an agreement like this and you give them rights, does this override and supersede, our current zoning? It does not. So in other words, my understanding is that even though we gave the farmer all of these rights, the end result is, because it's in an R1 zone that prohibits these rights, specifically livestock and things like that,
It doesn't give the grantor these rights.
it doesn't.
It does not. What it does is say that they are giving up all of their rights to use the property
Okay.
except for these items, but that does not supersede our ordinance. So it says they cannot develop the property. These are the now limited uses that are potential for the property, but not if it violates our other ordinance.
Because the agreement itself is for a perpetual duration.
Correct.
So the farmer decides to sell the property to a company that wants to put a horse farm in and wants to train and do all that good stuff. This agreement says that he can do it, but he can't because of the zoning.
And the agreement isn't what's going to be the ultimate legal document. The legal document will be the deed of easement.
It's in there.
And what the deed of easement, I understand, what the deed of easement says is that the grantor, the owner of that property, is in exchange for getting paid, giving up the right to do a whole series, basically anything on the property except these things. But that doesn't mean that township or county as grantee have said those things are permitted.
I didn't know because there was
Yep, no,
funds
it's-
being transferred. That's why I
Yep.
asked the question. Then it says all liens and mortgages are going to be clear. The farmer has testified several times that he has mortgages and stuff against the property. That means at the time of settlement, that it will be free and clear, and then it's done at that point.
My understanding.
That's my,
What happens with any of the farms that have outstanding mortgages
yes,
is that there is a required, what's called subordination.
I know what that is.
From the bank, okay, allowing the mortgage to be, continue to be paid, even though it is cleared out. The state receives copies of those, the county receives copies of those, and the subordinations language says that the county, the owners of the easement come first.
I understand.
Should that property go. So there is a subordination that has already been signed by their mortgage person. They are requiring X amount of dollars of what they would be receiving will be going directly to paying toward the mortgage.
So the reason I asked that question is the agreement calls for free and clear, and the farmer has testified that there were mortgages against the property.
That's part of the title search.
Yes.
That's part of the title search, and it is written on the title search, it's written what the subordination will be, and it is all of that will be coming to them.
I understand, but the Attorney Gross understands what I'm saying. It doesn't call for the permission of a subordination agreement or anything to that, or a partial release. It says all free and clear, cut and
Well,
dry.
it says the easement will be free and clear.
Yes.
If there is a mortgage that is subordinated to the easement is coming free and clear.
I would assume,
Yeah.
it's a question. That's all.
It's a fair point again.
Okay. Then the arrangement is that you're going to get title insurance on the property, which I understand what that is. Is the transfer tax on the property forgiven through this process? if there is a transfer tax?
No, it is
Not forgiven. If you look in Article 11.1, it says that the grantor is going to pay.
He pays all the transfer tax? Both sides? Okay.
My understanding, it says all taxes imposed.
It says all tax imposed with such and such, blah, 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 the authority shall be paid by the grantor, okay? So that's, in this particular case, that's the farmer. Okay, fine.
It comes out of his settlements.
So there is a transfer tax. That's, I'm good. Amendment and modification terms shall have no effect in force in writing unless it's done in writing, which is perfectly fine. The agreement can be assigned anytime prior to settlement. Is he going to be assigning this agreement to somebody prior to settlement?
You mean assigning?
Page 8, paragraph 7. The agreement may be assigned by the grantors without prior consent of the grantees, meaning that in my eyes, it says that the farmer can be, prior to settlement, transferred to somebody else without your knowledge, and that means you're bound automatically.
No.
But it says that,
Well, it wouldn't be without our knowledge.
but you can't stop it.
We can't stop it.
So I've never seen an agreement of sale where you can do an assignment without prior knowledge.
I mean, it's not prior knowledge, it's prior consent.
Prior
I
consent.
see it actually very often.
Okay,
but,
I'm fine. You know what? They're just
No,
questions.
but no, part of your language questions are valid because we complain about them at our office
Yes.
all the time. This document came out of the state.
Mr. Snyder, I would say it's something that we often ask
Sure.
to get prior
I mean, I've done
consent.
contracts all
Yeah.
my life, and to be
Yeah, I
honest
know.
with you, you could be sitting here with the farmer today, and you go to settlement and find out there's a big company here gonna put up, you know, a horse farm, and that's what you got, and he's gonna come in for a variance and all the other good stuff, and it's totally legal if he gets the variance. That's all I'm saying. No more, no less.
This does allow them
To do that.
assign the contract prior to sale.
Absolutely
I
does.
guess the one point I would make is, it also, there's nothing in here that prohibits them from, even if this language said that we had the right to consent,
Mm-hmm.
there would be nothing that would prohibit them from closing with us and the next day selling it to that same company. So from a practical standpoint,
I
I
agree.
don't see the risk to the township here. I hear your concern, Mr. Snyder. It's something that, no, it's something that comes up. It's always a question about
For
assignment.
5 months, we're dealing with the
Yep.
farmer, and this is the arrangement, and all of a sudden, you're sitting here, and that's not the case, and that's just a question, that's all.
I agree. And you're absolutely right that it could happen. The other thing that could happen is they could go through with this, and
so-
everyone should be clear,
And they can flip it.
day later, they could sell it.
Absolutely agree with
Yep.
that, and I understand that.
Okay.
On page 2, which is on the deed,
Actual deed of easement,
okay,
yeah.
that's the deed. You've answered my questions where the zoning doesn't apply, but on page 4 of the deed for the easement, paragraph number 6, it says that the rural enterprises customary part-time, off-season, minor, or rural enterprises are provided in this easement that it can do it. So as an example is the grim situation that's currently going on out in
Oh, absolutely
Makunji.
not. Yeah.
But that's what it says.
No.
And
There
you
is-
can't because of zoning, am I correct?
Yeah, absolutely because of zoning, and also there is within our program and within the state program, very limited scope of what qualifies under that title of use, and what the Grims have, or that is above and beyond. That
But
does
it's not stated,
qualify.
that's all I'm telling everybody.
It does in the program, which is what this is referring to, and it, first, back to that, it's their zoning ordinance is what is allowed and what not allowed. They get first dibs. We have one in our township now that our office said what their use was acceptable, however, it goes against the township zoning, so they cannot do it. The township rules first when it comes to
We're on the same
that.
page, zoning's
Zoning, this does not overrule our zoning.
When you answered my zoning question, it took care of a lot of different things in there.
Zoning rules first. Township rules first.
The other questions I have is, the contract itself calls for, in the very last page, copies of the plans. I'm assuming you've got a copy of all the plans that referred to, and you reviewed those and understand what rights come or don't come. I'm assuming that's the case.
Conservation plan, you're talking about is what the farmer has to do for his farming by the conservation district.
And the township has been provided copies of that so they can review it.
Not yet, they're going to get it now because they have not signed anything here yet.
So will they get it to review prior to signature?
Yeah, they can have it too,
Okay.
because it's part of the deed.
Page, Exhibit D. Exhibit D requires for disclosure of certain items. The contract says that anything dealing with ethics, okay, that is handled on the state level is also transferred down to the community level of the county as well as the township and the municipalities. Under consent, it says, consent means that permission signed by a duly authorized officer, employee of the Commonwealth, provided the materials are disclosed and blah, 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 and you work your way all the way through. And you go down to E, financial interest, paragraph number 2, holding a position as officer, director, trustee, partner, employee, or holding a position of management. My question is that if you go down to A, it says a violation of the federal laws dealing with the requirements of disclosure. Now, we've had a lot of conversations, and we all know in the real world that the guy that controlled these purse strings, worked our way through, is related. We know that the other person, Hosa, is related down there, and we know that Commissioner Warren is somewhere related. I have no control what happens in the county, but I do think that the fact that we are putting money in this arrangement, that A, you either would abstain, which I don't care if you do or you don't, but I think it should at least go for the record that there is a conflict or could be a conflict or there is no conflict, and just acknowledge that it exists in Whitehall. I can't control what happens at the county. That's all I'm saying.
How is it a conflict?
Because what has happened is...
I mean, I guess I would ask to the solicitor.
You asked me, and I'll answer. Through all of the testimony, it was stated that the preservation will increase property values by 10 to 15% in the area, which, if that's your position, so be it. And the fact that there is relationship between you and Mr. Hosa, and Mr. Hosa's property abuts the property completely, and he's the guy that works down at the county, and the guy who controls the purse strings, which is your boss, is related to Hosa. So there's just this thing that goes on, and I just think that, it's just my opinion, okay? If you don't agree with it, I'm perfectly fine, that according to this, it says that everybody discloses their arrangement. That's all I'm saying. That's what it says.
We hold that same protocol for people that consult, for developers that then hear the stuff of the planning commission, or?
Commissioner Warren, I agree 100%. It could or could not be a slippery slope. And in the event that I'm sitting where you guys are down the road, I understand that issue, but it was never discussed. And if everybody agrees that it is not a concern, I'm fine with that. I just brought it up because it's in the contract. That's all I'm saying.
This is, okay, so besides the fact that it is in every single contract, which it should be, everyone involved signs ethics paperwork every year for the county who are county employees, as well as anybody who's elected staff members. And that is open for a right to know request, should you request to do it.
So-
Also,
Go ahead.
this property was not chosen because anyone at the county said, I want this done and I want it done now. This was chosen because its rankings happen to be #1 for 2023 as far as farm rankings are concerned for this statewide program. This farm just happens to be receiving county and township money and not state money other than paying for the incidentals because of a time slot, which we've had more than enough discussion about, for the mortgage, for the fact that these folks went out and bought this
So-
in April. So this is not something that said, this is mandatory and needs to be skipped ahead of everybody else. If you want to see my rankings, you want to see the
Nope.
Lisa scores, you've
Nope.
seen them before, we've had this discussion.
So-
This farm ranked #1. So I'm insulted
Well, that's okay.
personally that you would think that this had to be pushed through or that it has any kind of relationship with anyone up here, let alone anyone else at the county. And I will tell you, I'm highly offended.
That's okay.
And I would say that, let's
no,
go,
wait.
there's other things that have dealt in this township that people have been related to. Extend it or not, and that was never questioned.
So here's the...
And the statements made.
Can we end this?
No,
I mean-
I have one more item. So the reason that came up is very simple, okay? We started out with a number of 950, whatever the number was. We went down to 375. At 375, it was always said that we would not have a problem whether we were in or out. And all of a sudden, we were told the money was pulled. And then the money went back. I didn't do that. That's what created the issue. I'm willing to let it go, but that's what created the issue. You came into us and said it was here, and then all of a sudden, when Whitehall was considering not doing it, then the statement was, well, if you don't do it, they're not going to get the money. And that's why I asked that question. That's the only reason why I asked that question. The actions caused that to happen. And the last item I have is that I would request that in the addendum, you have it that they put a sign on the property that says this property is being preserved in cooperation with Whitehall Township residents, so that they know that we gave the money to the thing and it doesn't get buried. So every parcel that fronts on a street, that there's a sign there that says that this ground is being preserved in cooperation with Whitehall Township residents. That's all. You can do whatever you want with this thing. I'm just pointing out the items that people talk to me about. Okay, they're not here to back it up, but this is what I have, and I'm not telling you not to sign it. I did my job and said, these are the issues here, just like you did your job. No more. Perfectly fine.
That's right. Does the county mark these properties indicating that they're farmland preservation?
Every farm owner receives a free sign
Okay.
that says preserved by Lehigh County. North Whitehall, now, let me finish. North Whitehall has also done a simple metal addition that said, and also, I have to look at their exact wording, but they put North Whitehall on there as well for any of the properties that they have put money in as well.
We see if the
can-
Weinhoffers are willing to put Whitehall Township on their sign.
I'm sure they will.
I'm sure they are, because they're thrilled that you guys said yes. And as far as wanting more than one sign, because their property is so huge, there would probably not be an objection to having additional
Yeah, I
signs.
think both sides of it.
Yeah, I mean, it
That's all.
makes sense to show it off and to show off that Whitehall did put it in.
I think we
And I
should.
think Randy Coe
Yeah,
would be more
I
than
agree.
happy to show you what the guys have done to help put a name on it, okay?
I'm perfectly fine. Thank you.
Okay, Attorney Gross, after all of that.
Yes.
We're relying on your expertise. I know with real estate, everything that's written is what it is. I mean, that's one of the things you can't say this was inferred or whatnot. So you're telling us, the board, that you see this as okey dokey, I'm fine with it. And that's how I see it right now. We can go all kinds of things, that aliens are coming down from, planet X too.
Only if he says okey dokey.
Only if he says okey dokey.
Okey dokey.
Okay.
Can I add, because I'm a lawyer, I can't stop that quickly, but, no, I have reviewed the agreement in detail. My opinion is that it conforms to what you all had heard and approved regarding this transaction. The one point that Mr. Snyder raised tonight, I'm certainly will look into before I would approve it finally for the mayor's signature regarding ensuring that the agricultural security area has been approved, or that we make that a condition subject to, as Mr. Snyder called it.
Why
instead of
was it
saying-
added about the 10% for land coverage, for building coverage?
I'm sorry?
The addendum.
No, that's,
Yeah.
again, I believe there are two ways to handle it. We either can look to add it, or we can wait to sign until it is done.
I would recommend
I
you
would
wait.
request that you allow me, as you do with most other similar agreements as solicitor, to handle that and make the final approval before it is done. But to go back to your original question, okey dokey.
Any other comments?
And the issue that was raised here tonight?
Mr. Warren, I don't have any knowledge of it,
No.
any way to comment on it.
And some of the allegations that were posted on social media are false, that I had talked to this farmer beforehand. I did not. I did meet them after and it's just, it's fair, but it's not right. Otherwise, any development plan that anybody has worked with or related to anybody in this township should be null and void.
So Commissioner Warren, just so you know, I gave it.
Let's keep it civil before we get into, let's just be
Do you
civil.
want to talk about some other personal things that were affected at me and my daughter?
No, it's not.
Let's-
We're not going there.
We should just
It's
continue
not.
on.
All I'm saying to you is, my purpose was not to attack you. My purpose is what was in the contract and what they called for. No more, no less. And I do understand that as the board sits up there, no matter what it is, we all have relationships within the township, and they all sometimes get questioned or whatever happened. If in fact that it did not come in one number and then pulled back and put back, I would have had a totally different answer. That's all I'm telling you. There is no personal thing between us on the issue, and it could be anybody else up there in that
Yeah,
situation.
that was not my doing.
I understand.
Yeah. And if Solicitor Gross would tell me otherwise, I wouldn't be voting.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions? With that being said, you're confident, Jack? Okey dokey? What's that? That's what we're doing.
Okay.
I was just
Okey
making
dokey
sure
did.
he was okey dokey. We
Before
got a
another
double
pig
okey
flies by
dokey,
the window
okay.
here.
Let's,
You know, that's a very, everybody understands what okey dokey.
let's take a vote here.
Okay.
Who knows what okey dokey means? Go ahead.
I actually want to vote. I do want to vote. Let's vote.
Okay, now Mr.
Commissioner
Stanton.
Swaniger, aye. Commissioner Warren. Aye.
Commissioner Ginder.
Yes.
Commissioner Fisher.
Aye.
Commissioner Attia.
Yes.
President Marks.
Yes.
Resolution passes 6 ayes, 0 nays.
Okay, under other, I have nothing. Under discussion items, I have nothing. Report of public officials. I will start with Mr. Attia.
The only thing I was going to report is the Rec Comprehensive Plan Committee. Just happy to see things have, I know it's taken a long time, but we've finally gotten to a point where I think we're down to our last interview for our 2 bidders. That's going to be this Wednesday. From what I've heard, the first round of presentations went really well. I'm just happy to see that that's moving forward. That's all.
Mr. Fisher.
Okay, I've got a few things. My mic working?
3 minutes.
Yes, I seen the light go on.
I got you. Go.
Okay. Okay, I'm actually, EAC left, but one thing I want to mention is there's an Eagle Scout project that's coming up in the Parkway, and it's meant to put signs at a few of the intersections. I am in touch with Brandon Hibbler. I think Brandon reached out to Development and Public Works. I've reached out to the mayor. I've reached out to a few commissioners. I just want to say this project is going to be submitted to Scout Council for approval by Friday. If the Scout has been jerked around a little bit on this project before, if there is any reason that anyone in this room can think for this project to not go forward, please speak now or speak before Friday, because if this can't get through by Friday, this Scout can't do the project. It's, I mean, I hate to go there, but it's going to put a really like black eye on the township if this doesn't work out. He got screwed before. He only has 6 months until he turns 18. So if there is an issue, he already has a project that he could work on lined up in North Caddy, and I'd rather keep the project in-house here. So there's an issue, just somebody email me like immediately, okay? The Scout is more than willing to work with the township. We just got to get this together.
Brandon set up the meeting. It's a late email today.
Oh, yeah, that's a different thing. That's a post-project. What he has to do is he has to get it submitted to the Scout Council. So if there's anything that kills this beforehand, the ancillary details can be figured out later, but the council needs to just approve 10 signs, and that's it. We can figure out colors, trail names and stuff later. So I hate to be a little negative about that, but I got some very angry phone calls, so I just want to make sure that gets cleared up. Okay. Okay, that was my bad. Now to my good. Okay. So, we're trying to set up a meeting. Okay, I'm moving. We're trying to set up a meeting. I'm sorry. I'm a hypocrite. Okay, we're trying to set up a meeting with Watikta and a few of the principals in the township to decide what the township wants to do regarding EVs and EV grants going forward. I spoke personally with Senator Nick Miller over the weekend and Congresswoman Susan Wild. There are grants available. They are willing to work with the township and Watikta, but Watikta kind of, from what I understand, Watikta kind of needs marching orders from what we want to do. So, Lee, thank you for your email today about your availability. I've only got 3 months left until I turn into a pumpkin, so I kind of want to move on this as quickly as possible. And the last thing I do want to say, I'll skip over the rest of the stuff, but today is 9/11, 22 years ago today. Like I'm sure everyone in this room remembers where they were at the time. I was in 8th grade, and I remember seeing it all on TV, and it was a very deep thing for me, and it's one of the things that inspired me to want to, help my community and help my country. So it's really kind of a watershed day for pretty much everyone in this room. So just everybody keep it in your thoughts and prayers. So that's all I got. Good night. Good luck, God bless, and I hope I didn't go over too much time.
You don't have time.
I know.
Mr. Gender?
Yeah, Mayor Mike, from the IRT meetings and the Rec Commission meetings, there were some comments made about the rail trail crossing on Chestnut Street. Now, it's signed and everything, but the striping on the street isn't. There's two white lines across, and they're about worn off. And there's been notice taken that we've redone some other intersections with the rail trail, and we have them newly lined and striped and everything. That one's kind of missed. And that one should really stick out, because when you're heading west on Chestnut Street, once you pass the entrance to the quarry on the right, that trail sets down in a little dip, and you really don't see it. Even though the yellow signs are there, with the speed people drive, they're past it. So I think we could address that one a little bit. And
You want that relined.
and striped, not just two lines across, striped also. And then on the township side, the barn side of the rail trail at that intersection, everything's grown out to the street. So you actually have to step out onto the street to look to cross. There is no sight there anymore. Everything's just grown in. You know, it needs to be trimmed on the corner. That would be the red barn side of the trail at Chestnut Street. It's just all grown in. You have to step out onto Chestnut Street to see if anything's coming. So I'm just passing through some things that were dumped on me. Frank, I'm not even going to talk about Mechanicsville tonight. If somebody else wants to, they can. I'm sure nothing.
I have a meeting on Wednesday with PennDOT.
I'm ready to go to Governor's Action Team, get them involved to help facilitate this, because I did ask for a meeting with PennDOT, and we were told it was just around the corner. I don't think the township should burden this cost after all the pain that we've gone through. There was articles written in 2012 where I talked about it in the Whitehall Copley Press, and here we are a decade later. And they're burning we approved more money for engineering fees. Granted, you did the work, but they're putting some hurdles in the way. And you look at the aerial photo there, and you got this bottleneck, and that's the only sidewalk that's not there. I'm not afraid to go for the Governor's Action Team, and,
Take all the help I can get.
yeah.
I'm beyond
And
frustrated.
I think it should be part of the multimodal. They should be paying for this. It's their road.
Yeah, can I ask one quick question? Didn't we say some time ago we might be able to like drag the local PennDOT representative in front of us?
Well, every
Is that
time
a-
they come in here, they want to talk about Riverside Drive, but nothing else.
No, but just specifically.
I
you're
did ask
here-
that, and I think we're beyond talking. I mean, we had the plans, they asked for this, it's a stretch goal every time, and then it seems like there's turnover. And when there's turnover, a new person wants something different.
Person with new comments now.
If we can, if multimodal can fund a sidewalk in Lower Macungie Township to benefit a Wawa, they can do it to benefit our school district.
Moving on, I want to jump on an email a little bit that Jack Myers sent out. It was about the parking lot that got done at the West Catasauqua Playground Building. We added parking on there. And it's true, everybody that was involved in getting that parking lot moving in such a short period of time, a big thank you to. That was, I know my years on this board, that was one of the fastest things I ever saw get done from inception to being done in a long time. And you were dead on with your email, Jack, thanking everybody and everybody that worked to get it done. And that's just a credit to our employees in this township. Moving on, where are we at with the treasurer's office audit from last year?
Couldn't be done, remember?
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, I'm sorry.
That's not to be confused with the SOC preparedness.
I had it on my old list here, and I was just trying to go through. Madam Treasurer, on your current report to the Board of Commissioners on the bank statement cash depository account from August 2023, if you look at the ending balance, the date,
Oh, okay. My mistake.
7/31/23, I'm not sure
It's August 31st.
if this is the right report or just the date's wrong.
Nope, That's August 31st.
so that gets cleared out for future. Mayor, have we done any sit down within the administration of coming up with a future plan for a recreation department, workshop, garage type building? They just seem to be not wandering around, but they don't have a home, and every other department in this township has a home. I don't know if any discussions have been done on that or not, but it is something that should be looked at. You know, these people are as important as Public Works and all the other departments, and having a place you call home to work, so to speak, I think is pretty important as far as getting things done, morale and everything else. Last thing I have, as I've spoken the last few months, for the bingo callers for the Active Lifestyle Center, these dates have filled in fast. There's only one left. So you all have an opportunity for the 26th of November. Anybody that wants it, here's the sign-in sheet. I'm sorry, but there's only one left.
I vote Ken.
I told you these were gonna go quick. And that's all.
Lies. Lies. No microphone for you.
That's all I have. Thank you for listening. What?
B-15?
No.
Didn't get that.
You have to say it with more authority.
I know.
Like okey dokey 15.
Okey-dokey. On the South Street, Sixth Street extension, which is leaving Allentown coming in, there's a tree that fell, you know, about this big, and it's pushed up against the edge of the hill there, but it's something that probably should get taken away, and I think pretty much that's Whitehall Township's territory. Okay, and it was still there yesterday. I don't know if it's still there today. And as sort of reference with what you had there with the overgrown stuff, on MacArthur Road in front of the mall, it's overgrown that unless you're 3 foot tall, you can't walk straight because of all the overgrowth that's on the pavement. So it just has to be cut back by the mall.
Where's that at?
Right on MacArthur, where the mall is. I mean, you just walk up where there's any trees. I mean, you've got this high, and if you're lucky, you can walk out here. I only know that because I walk that very often. I don't walk that very often, I just know it from
Talking about
walking.
north of the outlet into the mall.
That, yeah, like before that to the jug handle
Yeah.
going off. Okay. But I mean, it's something that's been a while, and I watched the guy, he walked through it just sort of like I did, like this, you know, it's not good. That's all. Next, Mr. Warren.
I'll be real brief. The updated TIP and long-range transportation plan are out for public comment. I don't know when it's due, but the two things that are on the long-range plan, thanks Frank Lee, 3rd and Grape Street, that's on, and actually Kimmett and Fullerton Avenue have been added. The only thing that, they have this interactive map, you gotta know how to click the buttons and turn on the pins to find out where the projects are. But I still think with more development, more traffic on Ma Chunk, that Presidential should be looked at as a safety project for a traffic light there. I mean.
South Whitehall.
South Whitehall, yeah.
I can throw a stone that far, but it's at least.
They threw it back at us
Yeah.
once. I mean,
Well,
those guys over there can handle it. I mean, I
Well,
was
just
here at the meeting.
Well, just remember, we can block that pipe at LA Fitness, and they can keep their water on the other side of the road, too.
You know, we're not making any friends here tonight, are we?
I don't have to engineer that. Thanks, that's it.
Are you done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay, I have nothing. Mayor's report?
I gave you some things here. Probably all read them already. But I want to say that the person who represents the suicide and public health, we have, I had a proclamation to give to her that says, whereas suicide is a public health concern, and whereas in the state of Pennsylvania, one person dies by suicide every 5 hours, making it the third leading cause of death for ages 15 to 34, and the fourth leading cause of death for ages 35 to 54. Whereas nearly 5.1 million people in the United States have lost a loved one to suicide, and whereas each member of our community is valued and irreplaceable, and whereas talking openly about stress and psychological health builds trust, reduces barriers to care, and enables early intervention, and whereas local and statewide suicide prevention efforts should be developed and encouraged to the maximum extent possible, and now therefore be it resolved, the Township of Whitehall Commissioners and Mayor do hereby proclaim September 2023 as Suicide Awareness and Prevention Month, and September 10, 2023 as Suicide Awareness and Prevention Day in the Township of Whitehall, Pennsylvania. And that's that. It's kind of sad to see how much happens, and how hard it is to come out of that. We only had, my wife and I had one child, but for the past 2 weeks, we've had 8 children that went from a caterpillar to a chrysalis, and now we have freed 6 monarch butterflies, and we have 2 left to go. That's it.
Thank you. Madam Treasurer?
I sent you my tax report, the treasurer's distribution account. It shows you what was paid out in business privilege, what was paid out to the township, and what was paid out to the school district so far. The cash depository account, which is, that money's transferred to Gavin every day. And the central operating account, which is the administrative side. So that's my reports for the month.
Any other business?
Okay. Mr. Solicitor, since in the beginning of the meeting, I mentioned that this is the 3rd consecutive meeting that one of our commissioners, Andy Roman, has not attended, that we've been on a not excused absence or whatnot, that I think it's time for us to go ahead and fill that seat up with somebody that's going to handle it. Can you tell me how we go about that?
So the Whitehall Township Charter says that a commissioner shall forfeit office if he fails to attend 3 consecutive regular meetings without being excused by the Board of Commissioners. That's section 3.08 of the Township Charter. My understanding, and from my review of the minutes, is that as of now, tonight, as this meeting concludes, Commissioner Roman has not been present or excused for at least the last 3 meetings. So the charter doesn't require action. My suggestion is that you consider taking action to confirm that that's your intent by a motion, confirm that that has happened, because the legal obligation, if there's a vacancy, is to fill it within 45 days to fill the vacancy. So if you don't take action, I believe it might be unclear the date of the vacancy, which would create a legal problem regarding bill. So those are my thoughts. If someone would like to, I can certainly, all I would do would be to again quote the charter if someone wants to make a motion to acknowledge that that was occurred.
I'd like to make a motion that we replace the seat currently.
It wouldn't be to replace it yet. I can.
Oh, it isn't?
I mean, if you were going to do this, and again, My suggestion would be that there be a motion that Commissioner Andy Roman has forfeited his office due to failing to attend 3 consecutive regular meetings without being excused by the Board of Commissioners pursuant to Section 3.08 of the Charter.
And you got what he just said, so that I don't have to try and repeat that? That will be my motion. Sorry.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Any comments? Please poll.
I mean, I have very brief ones.
Go ahead.
I mean, I'm gonna just go out and say, like, this whole situation breaks my heart, that it's had to come to this. I'm very sad that we're here, that one of my last acts as a commissioner is to potentially remove another commissioner. I mean, it especially hurts. What we've seen, especially over the last few weeks, is that, especially last few months, is that we can't function as a split board. The votes we've had have been too close and it's been too decisive, and I've had people ask me, you know, why did the board go this way, and I can't give a good answer. So it hurts, and I mean, within 45 days, I mean, we will replace, if this happens, we will replace this person within 45 days of the same party as Mr. Roman. I want to make that clear.
We're obligated to.
We are obligated to, and we'll make sure that the people of Whitehall have spoken, and they need to have their representation. So, that's all I have to say.
Any more comments? Please poll the board. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Pelagia?
Quick question.
Can you come up, please? Sorry.
Rob Pelagian, 415 Oakwood Drive. Just a quick question, and I don't know the charter, and I'm not trying to second guess you. Is there a notification requirement in this?
There is not.
Wow.
Although I would say it has been in the minutes of the meetings the last 2 months. And it's self-operative. Again, I don't mind, I'll read it one more time. It says that, a commissioner shall forfeit office if he, and then there are several things, fails to attend 3 consecutive regular meetings without being excused. So, there's no notice requirement, and as I said, I don't legally believe the motion is even absolutely required. I recommended it simply so that there's a specific date and time to start the clock, which is in section 3.09 regarding.
And Mr. Pelagian, you know that this isn't just the last 3 months, this is almost a year.
I've been to every meeting since he had his stroke, so I understand.
And we all feel bad, I mean, when you're sitting here and it's happening. But the thing is, he's never contacted me or several other people on the board. I don't know who he did or didn't, but it's just something that, it's a tough thing to do, but you got to do it. We've had situations like this in the past where people have missed out and everything, but this is the very first time that we had somebody get into that predicament while he was sitting here actually conducting it.
And understand, I'm not taking any sides in this at all. Just a point of clarification, I wasn't sure if there were any type of notification requirements. It's kind of odd that there's nothing in there, but it's the way it is. It's politics. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any more comments? With that being said, please poll the board.
Commissioner Sloniker, aye. Commissioner Ginder?
Yes.
Commissioner Warren? Aye. Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Attia?
Yes.
And President Marks?
Yes.
That motion passes 6 ayes, 0 nays.
You take it, he'll be notified?
This starts the clock of, like, sending the notice to the paper to put an ad in for applications.
The 45-day, I mean, that's why I asked that there be action taken.
45 days from start to finish, like, we have to, like, well, I think we do a 2-week time
The
period.
charter doesn't have those full requirements, it's 45 days. There's been practice for how this has happened in the past. Maybe we can talk about it tomorrow.
Okay.
I would need to look back on that.
Because I only did it one time when Ed left, when Ed left and then.
And I haven't investigated that fully.
Okay.
My recollection is that that was something the board decided to do because the charter doesn't
Oh,
say that, but I believe that was the practice of the prior board in order to accomplish that.
We've done it when commissioners have resigned.
But and I'm not saying you shouldn't do it that way. It's just I don't know that there's a legal requirement to do it that way. My recollection is that.
I'm just saying
Right,
because
that
of
the
the
board,
timing of
right, that there have been
getting
ads
ads
and
in,
then
like,
people submit
we're already
names.
past this week.
How can we officially notify Mr. Roman of the action that was taken tonight, just as a courtesy? Do you have a suggestion?
We can talk about that.
Okay, okay. Okay, with that being said, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
Do I have a second?
I'll second Fisher.
Atia Fisher.